Yeah, I know. Well, you said you were gonna have 2 meetings, but maybe you don't need to.
We'll
Yeah,
call the meeting to
okay.
order.
Thanks.
Public comment.
Better to Kester.
I know.
Hi, Rich Fitzpatrick, 2 Hammond Ave.
I
I
know.
wanted to come and say thank you in regard to the redesign of the Beechwood Norman Todd intersection. I'm sorry I couldn't be here the night when you covered it, but it seems gigantic improvement.
Good.
Good.
They just finished paving that space where they moved the sidewalk over. So it's more or less functional, as it's going to be.
Yep.
And, it's, as Mike said, a half a loaf, but it seems like a big improvement.
Oh, good.
Good.
I mean, it seems like a compromise
That worked.
that I think can work. I know a lot of people put a lot of time into something that they thought was already done, so I just wanted to acknowledge that, Mike and Brian Joyce. And
Excellent.
for coming out, so
Good.
thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you very
That's
much.
very kind.
And just to follow up on that, Brian Joyce did the yeoman's work of making the thing happen, so all the credit needs to go to Brian for making that happen.
Good.
I just gave the thumbs up after he negotiated it. He did the hard work.
So,
Thank you.
I just wanted to-
Thanks for the
Thank
feedback,
you
Rich.
very much.
Nice to have good news.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
Good reports. Thanks.
Any more public comment? I guess we can go right into the HR.
Yeah, that's nice.
How you doing, Brian?
Hi, Brett, how you doing?
Good.
So, as you can see, I have a binder, and I provided Mike with a binder as well. If each member of the board would like a binder of what we put together, I'm talking about, take it. If you don't, you can just leave it here, and we will make good use of all the copies.
And seriously, if you want to keep your binder here,
Oh, that's
we
nice.
will be, having other employees look at these.
Yeah,
So, don't feel that you have to take these home with you.
okay.
Unless you really want to.
Well, I'd like to read it, though.
Another item for the.
That's not a problem at all, but if
No.
you don't want to keep it,
you got a whole attic
appreciate it
full.
back here so we don't have to
Okay.
kill any more trees.
What if we find typos? Just
Uh,
just kidding, just kidding, just kidding.
Just kidding.
There had to be a lot of copying going on today, so there may be a mistake here or there, but hopefully.
Well, Diane will take care of that.
So again, just to formally introduce myself again, Brian Magner from Deutsch Williams Town Council's office. And I specialize in labor and employment law and have worked for the town for over 10 years with Deutsch Williams. So just to give you a quick overview of my presentation, first I just wanted to explain what we did so far in terms of identifying problems, gaps, and shortcomings with the town's existing HR policies. The second part, and that has to do with this packet here. The second part would be what steps we should take now and that I would recommend taking along with the town manager to address some of those shortcomings and gaps. And then finally, I would just maybe weigh in on, I know the town is considering creating an HR position in conjunction with the school committee, so if you want my recommendation, I will offer that to you. So, as you know, at some point at the beginning of the fiscal year, Mike had asked us to do a full review and essentially an audit of the town's existing HR policies. And just to be honest, there was a lot of stuff that had sort of been backlogged. We found documents and policies and memos and directives back into the 1980s and 1991, and so there was a lot of sort of cleaning up the old stuff. But what we did is sort of go through each and every policy to say, what do you have now and what should you have? If you need a draft policy, we've provided in here. If you needed resource materials to explain that area of the law, we've provided that in here. And we've made any suggested edits to existing policies that you do have. So, I don't want to bore you with all of the details, but essentially what this book would be is a foundation and framework that you could then do a couple of things with. You could create an employee personnel manual by taking some stuff out and leaving other stuff in. Or you could create a resource guidebook for if you do hire a HR person internally. Now, this would be sort of a book that they could always go to, a reference guide. So there's a lot of material in here, and I don't wanna bore you with all the details, but just a couple of examples I think might be instructive. For example, we looked at your equal employment opportunity statement and policy and your harassment policy,
Page 2.
and that's on page 2. And you'll see there that, and we provide a current copy of the policy as well as our suggested changes. The couple of changes we would have here is, one, a lot of places have a joint anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policy. It's not two separate policies, it's combined into one. And we've provided you with a draft combined policy in here as well. So, and then our suggested changes, things like, you know, we don't have gender identity as a protected category, and we don't have that in our current policy. So that's a protected category now in Massachusetts, so we would edit that and suggest editing it, and in our draft policy have included that. Also, with respect to who is the person who someone reports to, in your policies now, in your two policies, it just says the town manager. It's best practices to have two individuals that you would report potential harassment or discrimination to, and you should have two individuals of the opposite sex or opposite gender, just because people may feel more comfortable going to a person of one gender. And I think, you know, someone like, is it the finance director? The
Mary
director of
Gallagher, yep,
finance? Mary
Director of
Gallagher.
Finance.
You know, she might, I'm not offering her to do the job or volunteering her, but, you know, somebody of that stature, so. You know, that's just those two policies. If we flip the page,
And just before you flip the page, if you go to like harassment policy was tab C, you'll see the book that they put together is based upon all of these tabs where you can go back and find out the more information. And then in some sections, there's subsets, which you'll see as well.
So the next page,
Oh,
so
I
there's
see,
like
right,
C1.
okay.
C is
Yeah.
the divider,
Got it.
and 1 and 2.
Okay.
you know, sorry, it takes some time to get the hang of it, but,
Yep, got it.
Got it.
It's very
so,
good.
and then the draft policies behind tab C3, so,
Excellent.
yeah, that's one example of what we did. Another example would be sort of, if you flip to page 4, excuse me, page 5. You see that, you know, we are currently complying with the Family Medical and Leave Act, but I'm not aware that we have a policy, so we've provided you with a draft policy, the Family Medical Leave Act, that there may be some negotiating that needs to be done with unions when you enter or adopt a policy like that. But, you know, that policy would set forth, and everybody would know what's covered under the FMLA and what types of leaves the employees are entitled to. So, we provide the draft policy there. With respect to maternity leave, you have a maternity leave policy in your bylaws, but in the policy it says that you can only take it for the birth of a child or you know, the adoption of a child. Well, in fact, under the MMLA, the Mass Maternity Leave Act, you could, if you adopted a child who was, say, 10 years old or 15 years old, you would be eligible, but that's not represented in the policy right now. So, you know, that bylaw should be amended to make it current with the law. So, you know, there's many examples. The next page, on page 6, the military leave. You know, this is what we often found too, that you have a military leave policy that was dated 1990. Well, much of the applicable law on military leave issues was passed in 1994 under USERRA, which is a federal law that governs military leave. So you can see where that policy should be, you know, called out, and we should make sure that we're complying with USERRA. So as you can see, we went through just about most, if not all, policies that are in existence in the town. You know, conflict of interest laws, you know, on page 8 is another important policy that we should be vigilant on adhering to. So with respect to all the policies, you know, that's what we did for just about every policy. And then the second half, what we did is, and you'll see it behind tab number 2 in your binder, it's pretty about 75%, 80% of the way back in your binder. There's a large tab 2 down the bottom. Yeah. So we went through and reviewed all of the posting requirements. Sorry. But one thing that we found is that you have posting requirements in every place where you have workers. You're required to post all the different laws and protections. That was being done here at Town Hall, but it was not being done at the other work locations, and that's just not sufficient because there are many employees who may not have occasion to come to Town Hall for extended periods of time. So what we've already done is gone out and I believe Jen Warham and Mike have already purchased, and in the next day or two, those
They arrived today, and Jen is disseminating them those today and tomorrow.
yeah. So we'll go to all the different work locations and make sure, you know, if there's a kitchen area or a bulletin board, that those laws are properly posted. And we've given you copies of all the posting requirements that are needed to be in compliance. So,
We need a big bulletin board.
well, they do a nice job, but some of the companies do produce the posters that kind of
They're
condense-
laminated and condensed.
Yeah, so those are, you know, that's what we've done so far, and like I say, this is not an end product, it is a working document, for, to be left here in the town for someone who's gonna deal with these issues on a daily basis. And what I would suggest going forward is that, you know, in the weeks or months ahead, that we work with Mike to make any of these small changes to different policies. If it's outdated, if it needs language added, if it needs a protected category added, that we would work with him to make those changes. And then in the long term, if there's anything in a bylaw that needs to be amended, that would have
There are
to be-
two level of fixes here, is ones that we can do relatively within the next week or two, that we'll just implement and make sure that everything's caught up to date. And then the second one, as Brian's saying, is gonna be a longer term piece, which will be a bylaw change, because our personnel policies are written into the bylaw. And they need to be updated, as you'll see in this manual as well.
Is that standard that they're in the bylaws, or should we look at taking them out of the bylaws?
Good question.
And then having them as a separate,
So what you don't necessarily have all of these policies in your bylaws, but what you do is you have, for example, maternity leave, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. You have a reference to maternity leave and what benefit you give, and that's in the bylaw. Over time, it becomes outdated,
Yep.
and now it needs to be amended. I mean, you could take it out of the bylaw, but, and I mean, you're required by law to adhere to the Mass Maternity Leave Act,
on
so.
the personnel side,
Yeah, on the
right,
personnel side, so you don't need it in a bylaw,
Mhm.
that's something to consider, but,
Mhm.
you know, it doesn't hurt to have it in as many places as possible, so.
Although with it being, it and other things being in bylaws, some things are in, some things aren't, and then
Right.
when the federal or state laws change, then you have to address them that way, so,
Correct.
I don't know,
Yeah, you may wanna
something to
take it out,
discuss.
and just, you could have something as easy in the bylaw as, you know, we adhere to,
Referencing.
federal and state laws, that pertain to maternity leave, including but not limited to the Mass Maternity Leave Act and the Family Medical Leave Act.
And then reference Cohasset personnel policies. Because the
Right.
personnel policies, then you could update as things change.
Right, you could reference, yeah, exactly.
But, you know, are there some things that are at a certain standard, that they would be included in the bylaw and not something else? I mean, there's all the discrimination and you know.
So I mean, I guess those are covered by laws. I mean, there are other things in your bylaws that are not. For
Okay.
example, your vacation time.
Mhm.
There's no law that says how much vacation time you need to give and how it accrues. And actually, there is sort of an ambiguity when you read the bylaw on whether it accrues monthly or the people get all of the time, the employees get all of the time in a one-shot deal, say on July 2nd
Right.
of a fiscal year. So that should probably be clarified, but something like that you want in the bylaw
Okay.
because it's not spoken about anywhere else. And so if an employee, non-unionized, wants to know what their benefits are, they would presumably
That's
go
where
to
it's
the
gonna
bylaw. Bereavement leave is another, holidays is another benefit that's included in there.
So would that be better described as quantifiable benefits that you'd want to have articulated because they have a value to them in the bylaws, but things that reference other laws and regulations you want to have in the personnel policies? Because
Yes,
they
and-
are ever changing?
Yes, and those are only gonna change at your discretion. They're not gonna be changed by the legislature. So
That's a good
that-
distinction, yeah.
So those things are more applicable to a bylaw.
Within our control.
Right, totally within your control.
Is it the norm, Brian, for those to be in a bylaw or to be in a HR policy manual?
You know, I can't say that, you know,
Excuse me.
I think most places are probably similar to yourselves, it's some, issues, take the Family Medical Leave Act, that came into existence, don't quote me, but I believe 1991. So a lot of people dealt with issues like that, you know, I don't know when maternity leave came in terms of the statute, but a lot of things, you know, military leave is a perfect example that's in there. The military leave, federal law came in the 1994. Your policy that you had in there was 1990, so it made perfect sense to have a policy out there on your own because it wasn't covered by federal law. But as it gets covered by federal and state law, there's less of a need to have it in a bylaw.
So it may make sense to just reference the law,
Sure.
and that would change, as that change, you don't have to update our bylaw.
And then but it also gives notice to the employee who's reviewing it that, okay, I know that I need to go to either your policy or the law to reference what my rights might be.
So I asked Brian, and he was very humble about this. I says, oh, with this product now that you've been working on for several months, you know, is this a product you can now use with your other clients? And he hesitated a moment, and basically he says, well, they're all light years ahead of where you were. And I say that from the standpoint that because many of the communities that he's worked with have had personnel managers managing this, that when an FMLA issue comes up, well, they have a folder on that, and they have a folder on this, and they have a folder on that. Before you know it, they have a binder with all of this in here just for doing their job. With us, because it's somewhat piecemeal, and it hasn't been looked at since the 90s, is we are light years behind our peer communities. And this was a yeoman's job, which was why it's taken so long to come up with this.
Brian, that's on a, you know, this is obviously a mountain of work to get to this point on, just on the baseline policies that govern employment. But beyond that, where are we deficient currently in the way that we operate with our employees?
Well, I think one difficulty, I would say, where you're deficient, you know, you face the same struggles that a lot of communities face. You are bound by the laws that protect employees and give them rights and protections. And there's also your unionized workforce as well as a civil service workforce with respect, is it both police and fire? Or
Police and
civil
fire.
Police and fire. So you've got layers upon layers of protections. So that is going to make managing more difficult because, you know, while those protections are good and there's very good policy reasons for having those protections for employees, they do create, you know, burdens and hurdles towards management. So I can't identify one area where I would say the town of Cohasset is deficient in its management of employees. But I think you guys struggle with a lot of the same issues that other communities do. And for example, I think, was it the acceptable use policy, Mike, that we're trying
Computer
to-
use acceptable
Computer use
policy.
policy, that is not in here, because I know that, we adopted it, but that's still not the law of the land with some unions, because we couldn't bargain it in to them, so.
Well, along those lines, as an example, do we have clearly defined job descriptions? Do we have a clearly defined review process for each employee? With a review process, do we have a performance evaluation?
That is something, job descriptions are very important, and my guess is, and just from reviewing some of it, it is similarly outdated.
Yes.
And Mike could probably speak to that better, but yes, keeping up-to-date job descriptions, job titles, job duties, that is something that is probably lacking in the town as well. And I do think that, having somebody who's focused on HR, an internal person, could identify those issues and, kind of be dogged about, what, we need to get better personnel, job descriptions, we need to update those. And that can be a project that they can work on, compiling all of that information. So, that would be another benefit. And with respect to evaluations, that's just another thing. One thing is teaching managers how to conduct evaluations, how to properly document what your workers are doing. And those people too can use a resource of an HR person to sort of, hey, is it okay if I counsel an employee on this, or can I discipline an employee on that, or, can I manage in this way? Or is that gonna run afoul of some type of contract or law?
And to your point, Steve, our job descriptions need to be redone because some of them go back to the 90s when they still had typewriting. But I would argue that that's our step 4. Is the first step is identify where we're at. The second step is what can we fix immediately, and what do we need to fix by bylaw so we have a level playing field. Then the third step is to move forward with a townwide HR, individual to do this, and then their first task, more or less, is going to continue to implement everything we've done through steps 1 through 3, but start step 4 and start to do the job descriptions, the job classification, and go through that to make sure that our employees are being treated equitably compared to what the labor market is for their positions, and to make sure that there's a defined job description, which will then also lead into, performance and review standards. I just pulled out, this is my binder on police, just of all the things that have happened. And I have one of these for each one of the different labor unions and stuff that we have to go through. But this is, an area where someone else would hold the main documents for.
Brian, one other, an additional question. Many of the highlights you have in here are actually, in your case, questions. This should, I'm just picking one out. Did this apply only once? If so, it should be removed. No current text, which appears a lot.
So in the no current text section, many times that I either supply text in a draft document, or if there is no policy, for example, I think, you don't have a dress code policy. If you want one, we can give it to you. If you don't, there's no law that says you need to have one. With respect to the, was this ever implemented, if not, it should be removed. So in terms of reviewing this, you will see throughout here, you'll see a memo, Mike, what was the
Page
one?
6, let's go to page 6 with military.
Well, actually, if you give me a second, let me finish the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because the question I have is that this would appear to be a fair amount of review work on our part or on an assigned group to review this and make the suggested changes or recommend adoptions of either language or changes to language and so on. Is that a fair assessment?
I think so.
Okay. That's where I was going with the question. this is very, highly valuable to us, because I think it's the first time that any of us have seen it consolidated into one package. But this is only the beginning, I guess,
Right.
that's really the.
And that's why I said this is the framework or foundation, however you wanna phrase it, to start, and there are questions in here. And like I say, there are some, you'll see a random memo that'll have some handwritten notes on it from 1996. It says, and again, Mike, I can't remember what it is, and we don't need to go to it, but, yeah, was this ever adopted, or was this just something that somebody did one year and
Mhm.
never had to
Hand
go?
out, yeah.
Okay.
And just in terms, I think Mike had wanted me to, and if you want me to address a recommendation on whether or not you have an internal HR person or position created, I think I would strongly recommend that. And given a town your size, it may very well make sense, and I would recommend if you can work with the schools to have a joint school HR person, that may be a win-win for everybody. So,
And part of this industry is that it's a dynamic industry. As the state or fed start to change regulations, you need to have a point person that's solely responsible for HR. And we don't have that right now, and that's part of the reason why we're 30 years behind where we need to be. And the same thing with the labor agreements. Our labor contracts are all somewhat different for each different labor group. And that also can change also on a regular basis based upon how the contracts are negotiated.
right, I think Mike used the term, and I was gonna actually use it, is piecemeal. By having the HR functions and, contract negotiations with labor unions, having everything sort of spread piecemeal on assignments, you're drawing on a lot of the time that other people could be used on their main job. If Mike's dealing with an HR issue or a labor issue that could be dealt with, it's drawing time away from what he could be doing otherwise for the town. So the piecemeal approach, while it has worked and it may be past its time.
Not every labor or HR issue needs to involve the superintendent or myself. A lot of that can be done at a lower level, 80% of that may be able to be done by a new individual. Clearly, as the department head or, the superintendent or myself, we have to be involved in the final decision or part of the strategy, depending upon what the issues are. But, just as Jeff Nutting had mentioned, is the third job of the selectmen is that you should be, the board of last resort to solve a problem that can't be resolved at a lower level. The same thing needs to happen with HR, is that, we need to have some of these important but less demanding issues resolved at a lower level with someone that's trained in HR. Now, some of that times that happens with department heads, but the department heads don't have anyone to turn to, so then they come to the superintendent or to the town manager, which then pulls us back into it. Whereas they could go to the HR manager and be able to have that information, or go to town council.
Sure, and just an example, a complaint comes in from a department, an employee has a complaint, whether it's a harassment complaint or two employees aren't getting along and they're arguing, whatever the case may be. Mike can designate, say, okay, to the HR person, you go investigate, see what happened, and report back to me. HR person talks to the department head, all right, what do we think happened? They interview the two people, or, investigate, and they give a 2-minute report back to Mike to say, yeah, it was nothing, it's really not a big deal, or this is something that we're gonna have to look at further. As opposed to Mike going down, meeting with the department head, conducting the interviews, and a half day is lost. So that's just one example.
Is there, do most, I guess municipalities have some kind of a reporting structure for issues? I mean, is that something that would be spelled out in writing? That
Well,
if you have a problem with, coworker across the room, you
Go up.
first go to your supervisor, then the supervisor would
Escalate.
Yeah, it depends on the nature of the problem. You know,
Yep.
for example,
Dolphins
if it
could
was
use that.
sexual harassment or something, say we have people that you can report to outside your department.
Right.
But in terms of just typical grievances, those typically percolate their way up in the
Through the
department head.
management.
And, so I think then the town manager or, you know, basically the chief executive of the town can delegate his authority or her authority to either a department head or an HR person to conduct an investigation or look into a matter and act as his or her designee.
And should that be spelled out in like a personnel handbook or an employee handbook, that if, then?
I think it's a case-by-case basis. I think, you know, a real serious issue, the town manager may wanna be more involved. I mean, I don't think it has to be spelled out, but, I mean, it is within the purview, I believe, of the town
Management,
manager,
sure.
authority under the Town Manager Act.
But some of that would come with training too, is that, you know, by having regular periodic training with department heads to go through what-if scenarios, which we have not done
Right.
in decades, that it would allow for a department head or an employee to know which way to go. I mean, you do also have a grievance procedure, and sometimes the grievance procedure can be followed informally versus being formally, but that starts to put together the pecking orders to how things go forward. I mean, a lot of things, you know, particularly in public safety, you know, are dealt with by the chief before they even get to me.
Brian, obviously you've put a lot of work in this, it's very comprehensive, and our work has only just begun in looking at this, and it's not something that's gonna be easily or quickly solved or brought up to an acceptable level in a short period of time. I think that we should probably, you know, look to having, Mr. Chairman, maybe a session once we get through some of these
Yeah.
other pressing issues. But in the meantime, well, I guess the board needs to talk and decide about how we'd like to pursue this and who might in town hall might be doing some of the original legwork and, you know, finding out if we did adopt things. Maybe that's through the town clerk's office but we have a lot of discussion and answers to determine as to how we're gonna make this happen.
Right.
Well, I mean, to jump in and answer some of the questions is some of these policies and procedures we're going to work on memorializing over the next week or so, just to get those low-hanging fruit that can be done. Some of these questions, as you mentioned, the town clerk, particularly on the veterans, I the town did vote one of these, and we're just gonna go back and certify when that vote is, so we have that, and then the policies can be done. So again, look at step 2 as 2 parts. The first is what needs to be done, what can be done immediately. We're gonna make that happen. The second is that, you know, as town managers, I'll come back and make some recommendations for what needs to be done with our bylaws to accommodate what's being happened with the low-hanging fruit. And that part is going to take some time, and I don't think you're gonna get a report on that until, you know, after the first of the year. And, you know, the timetable for that would be for annual town meeting.
Right. I guess in conjunction with that, I'd like to be clearer about what we are required to have in a bylaw, or what is advisable to have in a bylaw. There may be things in there that, and I don't know what I'm talking about, so, but it just seems, you know, I don't know, do we need to have a bylaw about vacation time, or is that something that's a policy that's in a manual?
Right, and I mean, just on that particular vacation time, seems like something that's well within the bylaw. I think what we had discussed earlier, if something is governed by federal or state law that changes, you know, every few years or gets amended, you know, it's good to have in the bylaw as well, because then you've gotta go back and change it, so.
Now, keep in mind, as Brian's given all these recommendations, he's actually working himself out of work. Then if you want to just touch on that as to how you work with other communities and.
You know, it actually, I did touch on this earlier too. The job, if somebody in HR is sort of on the ground here, working, it actually makes for much more efficient use of other people's times who are getting it piecemeal. So you get a better work product, one. Two, you get more efficient work from the other employees in town who had a piece of it, who, you know, it was a distraction for them maybe to be doing that work, so that they couldn't focus on their main objective. And then thirdly, it's more efficient, it'll save you legal costs, because many of the questions can get answered in-house, and it's just a quicker call to legal counsel to say, wait, is this right or is that right? And in just compiling documents, for example, if we need all the collective bargaining agreements, or there's a grievance in the police department, the HR person can kind of be on the scene, coordinate, you know, do you need to speak with this person or that person? They can kind of be the point person on the ground, we can funnel our questions through, as opposed to us calling 3 or 4 different people. So it's much easier for us, actually. It takes us less time to do what we need to do, if we have somebody on the ground.
Brian, also in sharing of having a joint HR person with the town and the school, are the laws similar enough between teachers and
I think
employees?
Many of the laws, there's a significant overlap. Many of all state and federal laws apply. You will see that there is an added component with the school of Chapter 71 governs school employees and the operations of school districts. So the individual would either have to get up to speed on that, or if they already knew it. It is an added component. It's not I think it's a hurdle that can't be
Mm-hmm.
overcome in any way, but,
It's like adding another union collective bargaining agreement to the process.
right, it's an added piece, but you would, yeah, you just, anyone who would do it would need to get up to speed on that if they weren't already.
And that's a relatively straightforward process, and nothing that's generally over daunting from a,
Nothing in the law is an overly straightforward process, but like I said, it's something that, in working with council too, I mean, we're very, and I know the school has very able counsel, so they could work with anybody. It shouldn't be a hurdle, that can't be overcome. It's not a reason not to have the joint, dynamic. If that works for you otherwise, that seems to be the way to go.
Some bedtime reading, folks.
You have to spend days reading this.
again, feel free to leave your books here.
Well, I would like to read it at
I
home
think this
first.
is an issue that is so important that we really do need to address it. And I think within our goals and objectives meeting, we set this as a highest priority, so.
Yeah, because we're so far behind.
I really, it's a very comprehensive job. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Just so you know, going forward, is what we'll do is we'll put together a matrix based upon all of the different sections in here, and keep the board updated where we are as we
Okay.
update things.
That's
That's a
great.
good
Thank
idea.
you,
I think that's the
Thank
best
you.
way of tracking this at this point,
Yeah.
as we go up to what, double F? Yeah.
Peter, you had a question?
Just a quick one. Peter Pescatori, Advisory Committee. Will you be getting one of these books up to the school people?
Yes, we can do that with Barbara, yeah.
Yeah, just so they can, it'd be a useful thing for them to have, plus, get their spin on it as well.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
may I make a suggestion that we consider convening either a subcommittee of this board or a citizens committee jointly with representatives from the school district to review the policies for purposes of, clarity, legality, and harmonization. Harmonization meaning simply that we're applying policies where applicable equally across the employee base. I recognize that collective bargaining will have an impact on some of that. But this is a fairly sizable task. And the end result of approving those policies still rests with the board. But the amount of time and the man-hours going into it are probably beyond our scope at the moment. And frankly, probably be under scope for quite a bit of time.
I think we probably need analysis of where the schools are vis-à-vis this also. I mean, they could
Yeah.
be ahead of us by
Yeah.
miles, or they could be in the same boat as us.
Yeah,
Do we know where they are?
I would say that the schools may be ahead of us on this, but all payroll and all benefits still run through the treasurer's office. So now that we got this today, and today was the first day that I've received this, is I will be sitting down with Barbara Cotato and sharing this with her and trying to get us a status update of where they are. But, you know, I think as everyone knows, my one community policy is this is one of those areas where economies of scale make sense to have same rules, same regulations, but for Chapter 71, which is an add-on, let's get the first 12 layers consistent across both parties, and then deal with the Chapter 71 add-on. I think to Steve's point, when it comes to the actual quantitative benefits, you know, again, those are dictated by collective bargaining, which covers all of the school employees, police, fire, and clerical and library workers here in the town, plus a couple other sub-unions in the schools. And those are the items that I think is where the discussion is going to be a little bit longer and where you're going to need more input, because where the town can adopt those per the bylaws, the town should. And the school doesn't necessarily have to adopt them via the bylaws. They have, you know, different discretion under their collective bargaining agreements. But to get to providing equitably across the all employee base, I mean, I think that's something that we've strived to do with our collective bargaining this year, and we made some major steps to that. But I will not say that we have fairness across the entire system.
Right, and I'm looking at the, yeah, just looking through the highlights of this and recognizing that there's a fair amount of work and research that can go into each of these, because the policies themselves may seem somewhat innocuous when we look at them, but recognizing the knock-on effects that can be drawn from them, the potential risks they foreclose or open for us, are things that, number one, I'm not so certain that we have the expertise to entertain. And number two, I know from experience for the last several months that we don't have the time to really focus on it. And that's why I'm asking the question, as to whether or not we should consider formulating a committee that would bring in the constituents to come back, to review these and come back to us with recommendations based upon the input from the managers, both of the town and the school district.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed this last year at some point, trying to find some kind of a subcommittee that can, and then we decided to send it to council to put this kind of thing together. So I do think it's probably worth forming a committee, whether it's a subcommittee, it's probably more or less a subcommittee of the town manager as opposed to the board of selectmen.
Yeah.
At least in getting through this, although we can certainly advise on that. There's so many people in town that are HR experts, which is fabulous. We can count on them as well. But I wonder if, Michael, maybe it's probably going to take you, even though you might start cracking this tomorrow, it's probably going to take a couple weeks to get that matrix. Maybe when we get the matrix and we've got things kind of delineated, these are things that are literally just a matter of changing some language, and it doesn't involve bylaw changes or even policy discussion at the board level. We're going to take care of that. Here's a timeline. Then there's this stuff that really has to be combed through. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of a roadmap to get to where you want to go.
And I think I understand your question, your statement a little bit clearer, is that most of these regulations all fall under the Town Manager Act with the town manager, as Diane was alluding to, but for going for bylaw changes, and that would have to go through town meeting. In an earlier presentation that I had provided, and Diane was working with me on this, is part of a redraft of personnel policies would be to include an HR advisory committee to the town manager. They would be able to go through this process. And I've ran that by council and gone through what best cases are in other communities. But we're behind the 8 ball, as we've made it clear. We are vulnerable. So over the next couple weeks, with the assistance of Jen Orem, we're going to tackle these low-hanging fruit and get these components up and running so that we have those on record, so that we can at least have a stopgap. That's my objective right away, is to work with her, put together the matrix, and do what can be done right now. When we get into discussing some of the broader issues, the quantitative issues, the things that we don't have, that we do have control over, and we want to amend the bylaws, that's going to be a longer discussion where, you know, hopefully by that time we'll start to have put together this HR advisory team to help with that. And again, I'm not going to say that this is going to be done in this part is not going to be done in December. This needs to wait until the next start of the next calendar year to be ready for town meeting, just because there are so many other issues that need to be done. But again, I at least want to just get us protected based upon the laws and regulations that we have not adopted appropriately, and make sure that those are disseminated to employees across the whole board. I mean, you heard we don't even have in our sexual harassment a distinction of gender as a protected class.
Okay.
Need I say more?
And I think it might be helpful too, when we get that matrix, to have also sent a copy up to schools for them to look at, and then maybe a gap analysis where they look at our matrix and see how they compare to it. And maybe there's some stuff that they've already got that we can just pull in,
Mhm.
and vice versa. But a gap analysis would tell us where both of us are at, and then we can have a discussion with them, how do we, all of us want to move forward?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And
Which gets to Steve's point of how do we form a committee, or what is that vehicle?
I'm not trying to propose the solution, but rather recognize that
We gotta do something.
need
we gotta
help
do
getting there,
something. and
too.
We need
Yeah.
help getting there. And how soon do you think the matrix or roadmap that you're thinking of is gonna be complete, before it's complete?
oh, I think we'll have a preliminary update on your meeting on the 19th, I think, in 2 weeks. Preliminary, you know.
Okay.
What things, in this document, there are some draft documents that Brian has put together.
No, I
So where
saw
those
that.
are, we're just gonna adopt those
Yeah.
and put those into our personnel policies and disseminate those out to all the employees so they know about it.
I think we might be putting, at least from my point of view, Steve, the horse before the cart right now.
That's
The
where it
cart before
belongs.
the horse, I'm sorry. Too many cough drops over here. But I agree with Michael in moving forward in what we can in order to put the
Low-hanging
town
fruit,
in,
yeah.
better standing. But I also agree in, bringing in, we have very many people within the community. I can think of a half a dozen people who have not only HR experience, but HR municipal experience. So I'm not in disagreement with that. I think that I would like a chance to be able just to look at this, to see Michael's matrix, and to understand, have a better understanding of what we're dealing with before trying to decide how we're going to deal with it.
No, I fair enough. I'm looking at this from the perspective of those things that we address, policies, major policies that are either codified in our bylaws or will require change in a bylaw, and that's where I was concerned by having to fish through this. Maybe
I don't
that's
know,
the
it seems
wrong
pretty
term.
well organized and.
No. Fish through it by saying, okay, so what is it that we need to address? And picking out those parts. That part can be fairly time consuming. That's all. That's what I was driving at. No, I believe me, I want no part of defining how we deal with this, or not, I'm sorry, defining how the management deals with the function of organizing this. I think that is best left to our managers. However, when it comes to policy directive, that's the part where I do
Right.
believe we're gonna need some help identifying where it is we need to insert our opinion.
I also think the big discussion needs to be had, and, about the HR person, an in-house HR person, a shared person, how we're going to do that. What are the pros and cons? And, I was looking at the bylaw that town council provided us from Canton, and that's quite extensive about how the committee is set up and who sits on it and who appoints it. And so I think there's a lot more discussion that has to be had, towards that end, before we even say this is what we're going to do, other than to take care of the things that need to be taken care of and can be taken care of immediately.
I agree. Your two big roles are gonna be the policy discussion on creating this position and also bylaw changes. And those are gonna come to a head, and probably in January,
Right.
just given the schedule of everything else.
Well, particularly with the FY15 budget, that we're gonna have to have this discussion, and I
Yeah.
would like to discuss other options other than adding a person to the roles in town.
It's part of your discussion, yeah.
We gotta have that, is there another way to do it? Is there another way?
Well, yeah, they say there's, outsource or insource,
Right,
right?
insource, outsource, and what time, and anyway, there's a lot of those discussions that need to take place.
But if there are any individuals in the public that want to get involved in the HR, it's something that I've been saying for over a year that we need to do, and as an advisory committee, and if anyone is interested in the public, Aaron, more than happy to entertain finding a role for them to assist in this, because this is, again, 20, 30 years of, I'm trying to figure out how to say this
Benign
politely.
neglect.
Thank you very much.
Very nicely
I
put.
just, I would like to make,
beautiful.
this is my opinion only,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, but I would like to make the caveat that there may be people who would like to become involved, but in this particular issue, I'd like to say we prefer to have people who have some education experience, expertise in the human resource.
Completely agree. It needs to be professional or educational, direct experience. That's what we need in this position. It's people that understand what these are before they have to read them. Because it's part of their lexicon, it's part of what they do on a day-to-day basis or what they were trained in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so do we have anything else to do on this at the moment?
And with the hordes of people that are gonna come forward to volunteer, Michael, you'd keep us updated on?
I will.
Thank you.
Would you define the number in a horde? I'm just trying to anticipate what I'm going to...
lot.
A little bit less than a boatload.
So I plan to just kind of
I'm gonna look
skim
through it.
through the whole thing and
me
then
too.
return the copy to town hall, so you'll have at least,
And we'll have a copy here on file, but I just want to make sure that other employees can review them. And
I just kinda wanna get a better feel for what's.
please
in
take
there.
it home. When you're comfortable returning it and you want to store it here, again, we'll look at it as you're storing it here. You're not giving it up.
Okay.
okay, next is the discussion of articles on the special town meeting warrant.
So, Mr. Chairman, the warrant went out to print the end of last week. The warrant will be delivered to us either Thursday or Friday to go to the post office. It will be posted by the constable on Friday and in everyone's mailboxes on Saturday, meeting the requirements of town meeting.
Great, thank you.
Also, and just one other item in here before you get into it, in dealing with the unpaid bills, there were two items that were there. Upon further review, it was a couple $1,000s with potential old sewer bills that they need to go back to the vendor who was doing work as part of hookups and want to make sure that the bill was legitimately coming to Cohasset versus to the house that they were connecting. So that's not going to be ready in time for town meeting. And also the issue with the discrepancy in salary is something that we're also going to be looking at, and if need be, we'll bring that to annual town meeting. So as I requested with that article, unless I was able to quantify that we needed that, then I would remove it, which I did.
That's Article 4? What was Article 4?
What was Article 4, yes.
It's gone.
Um,
I didn't
is-
print out the most recent.
The warrant that was in the packet, is that the same as what was
No.
sent out to us? No.
No, I believe Jen emailed to you the updated version after there were some
Didn't have time to clean it
clerical
up, so-
errors that were done via town council, and also that we identified in-house. I will tell you that all of those changes, there was nothing substantive to what you're looking at.
Okay.
So we can use the copy that
We
was
can
in
use
the
this?
packet. with-
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There may have been changes to the informational summary and titles of something, but again, substantively, the the request of the voted item has not changed.
Excuse me.
Oh, I don't need to go look at my email.
Okay.
Okay, so, do you want to proceed in any particular order in going through these, or,
Let's go front to back.
okay? Article 1.
You wanna have discussion and put forth recommendations?
Well, I think, yeah, these are gonna be in everybody's house, Saturday. There wasn't time to get recommendations in there, but,
The recommendations could be put up on the website?
Put on the website, and I'm sure that they'll be picked up in the Mariner. They'll come home on Friday, so people will have the Mariner on Friday and the warrant on Saturday.
so my thinking is if we can clear the decks with this before we get into other business this month, it'll be one less thing we have to worry about
Right.
before the special.
Just as a caveat,
Yeah.
I'm happy to discuss them and
Yeah.
vote on them if, cause I think time's of the essence, but
Yeah.
I do like to have the advisory weighing in on things
Sure, yeah,
prior
yeah,
to
yeah.
financial articles, just to hear what they say and, as a rule, that's what I
Well,
like.
we
but-
could, I mean, we could wait for them to do a review and see where things are at.
But Peter, you think you're getting to,
Thursday night, you're gonna start? or
next week
Next week.
and then the following week, so it's
Mm.
tight, but I don't know.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up in 2 meetings.
I mean, they're all very straightforward in housekeeping in nature, so,
Yeah, all right, so, but if there are any problems, we wanna know about it before.
yeah,
Yeah, actually, I'll try to do it all on the 14th.
okay.
I mean, I don't see why I can't run right through it.
So my sense is that we could almost do this on the floor town meeting just before it starts if there's no issues with stuff.
Well, you have the 19th as a scheduled date, so if you want to skip Articles 1, 2, and 3 tonight, because they have to deal with
Yeah, I'm
finances.
not sure what, you know, as I get into the agendas, I'm not sure how much time's gonna be available based on the schedule of the other stuff coming up, so.
Well, my experience was that when the board met to discuss articles on the floor at town meeting, it was not very productive,
Yeah,
and people were not really either there or paying attention.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I wouldn't mind voting on the floor at town meeting after we've had an opportunity to hear the advisory boards, but I'd like to have some discussion on them.
Yeah,
Is that
Fair, Diane?
Yeah, and, you know, I think the non-financial, some of these acceptance of mass general law, I have no problem voting on those.
whatsoever.
No.
Right,
No, I-
so
no, I
it's
don't.
more just the substantive, financial pieces.
So why don't we start with Article 4?
I'm
Then
happy to do that.
Determine if you want to go back to 1, 2, and 3.
yeah.
Mike, can you give me a copy of the warrant?
Okay, Article 4?
4, okay. I've got the actual warrant.
So Article 4, that's the one that, Woody brought to our attention
Yeah.
last winter.
Right, so just an acceptance of
Yeah.
Mass General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 23D.
Yeah, that's very comprehensive. I read it in the book myself, again.
And for those at home, basically what this does is if, for instance, a ZBA member missed a meeting, they could review.
Or any board or commission.
Or any board.
Any board. yeah.
They could review the agenda of that meeting and all the materials of that meeting and certify that they have done that. And do they have to listen to the tape also of the discussion?
If there is a videotape,
Yeah,
if
if
there's
If there are
is like a
any
transcript
recordings, they would
there,
have to
yeah.
listen to the whole discussion so that they're up to speed, and then they would certify that. Then they would be allowed to participate in the final decision.
But they're only allowed to miss one meeting.
One meeting.
If they miss 2 meetings, this doesn't apply, they can't vote.
Okay.
I think this is very valuable, particularly in the Conservation Commission, because sometimes they're down to only 4 people can vote on something instead of 7, and I think this would be very helpful.
Is that a motion?
Yes,
Second, so it's a motion to recommend it?
yep.
Second.
Okay, any more discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 5-0.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
It's just a stupid question
Yeah.
here. Under section A in the line 2, where it says this section for one or more types, and it's the numeral 1, it just jumped out at me. But that must be the way the state law is written?
I believe so, I will confirm that, but
Okay.
this was prepared by town council, so I assume.
Okay.
Where is that? I'm sorry.
This is probably
Right here.
quoting Mass General Law.
Yeah,
I
it
would
is.
Right, that's
say.
what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
thinking. It just,
Yeah.
it looks funny.
So there must be several different types of
No, it's not
judicatory-
right, Diane, but it may be the way the state law is written, so it may be moot.
Okay. Article 5, acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 57.
In essence, this article allows the treasurer to deny someone receiving any license or permit, or to revoke those permits if they're significantly behind on any of their taxes or fees paid to the town.
But just clarification, the treasurer, if it's a license that's provided by the Board of Selectmen, for example, let's say it's a liquor license, and they don't pay their taxes, wouldn't the Board of Selectmen have to?
Well, if you look at, the licensing authority may deny, revoke, or suspend. So
it's
it
whoever
would
the
still come
licensing
back to,
authority is.
that's correct.
Whoever the authority is would come back then, okay.
Correct.
So
It gives-
essentially, this gives us the authority, upon non-payment of local taxes or fees, to use that as cause to revoke a license.
Correct.
Okay.
And then you receive payment before that action occurs.
Oh, so this is really legal extortion.
We're just following Mass General laws.
Okay, fair enough. Oh, come on. A smile from you here, please.
Fred, I think that was a motion from Steve.
Second, I'll second.
Yes, I move that we extort. No, I do have a question on this, though. This, I just want to make sure that I am clear on this, as I read through this the first time and have to admit that attorneys must write the longest sentences. And after that, they punctuate poorly. So what I want to make sure I understand is this is restricted only to those licenses over which the town licensing authority has, has a say. In other words, is there a revocation clause here that I'm missing, such that if a citizen does not pay their, for the sake of argument, their excise tax locally, that suddenly they can no longer renew their driver's license?
It does say local licenses and permits.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
paying of
I'm just-
municipal taxes or charges.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to make sure I'm
That may be in
absolutely sure about that.
existence through the state,
It may be, but
but this, to me, it seems has to do with town revenues not paid and our licensing town licenses.
Within what we have the authority to do.
Yeah,
all right.
but that doesn't exclude Steve's question. There may in fact be some state law around that with,
Well, if the state law exists, Fred, already, and it's, in other words, it's
yeah, but
an
that's
authority
beyond
that-
our control.
Right,
Yeah,
right. I wanted to make sure that this wasn't going the other way, in that the community was actually pushing that information upward.
No.
No.
It says here every town board, and the town will accept, so it's
It's-
limited to town.
And section F describes the kind of permits and
That's right,
licenses
that's right.
that
Okay.
are taken into consideration. That we could revoke. Open burning,
Marriage license.
sales of article marriage licenses,
This
clubs,
could
associations.
Wow.
I imagine that would have to be revoked before it was performed though, right?
It doesn't say that.
Let's sneak in a little.
I don't see where that caveat is in here.
You're
could
not
be
allowed
very-
to
Are
change
you
the state
serious?
law, you
That's
either have
it?
to accept
We
it or
could be
not
very
accept it.
popular.
That's right, good point. This is state law. This isn't anything we've come up with. So
You
I
accept all or
move-
nothing.
I move that we recommend Article 5.
Second,
All right.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. Article 6, acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 41, Section 41B.
This allows us to legally pay our employees with direct deposit. It's one of those items that our treasurer collector identified that years ago when we started paying employees direct deposit, we had to accept the statute in order to do it. We've been doing it for multiple years. Now we're just gonna
So
be
it's
in
a big
compliant with town meeting's
technicality
approval.
We need to straighten out, yeah.
Correct.
Running
We
with
have a motion?
So moved.
We have a
Second.
second? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Article 7, acceptance of Mass General Laws, Chapter 200A, Section 9A.
This allows for abandonment funds to be maintained in the town versus, in essence, I believe, going to the Secretary of State.
And this would be checks and stuff that weren't cashed, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And they could be for 16 cents
Yeah.
that are just sitting there, and we have to document those all the time, and we're spending a lot of money having small little things be documented that we can accept.
Or it could be a really big check.
Could be.
Okay, do we have a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay, so we're gonna wait to hear advisory on the first three, 1, 2, and 3.
I'm glad to see we have a serve your community sheet on here again.
Per your request, Martha.
Thank you, thank you. I've had people request it myself.
Do we have any more information? I know, Mr. DiCaprio came in last week and explained to us, but, in regard to, you know, what the monies will be used for improvements to water and also for the sewer commission.
For Article 2 and 3, I have no additional information beyond what I provided you, and what's in the informational summary. So the water was the 45 and the 50,000
Yeah.
for a total 95,000. The sewer was 75,000. They may actually even lower that, which is okay because it's in the informational summary, but it's not going to be anything more than that.
Is the sewer coming in to talk to us?
The sewer and the water will be meeting with the advisory committee
know
to
that, but
present
the-
that. I don't know when you're gonna schedule another meeting to have that happen.
Okay,
And the sewer commission has not had a meeting yet to go over
Yeah.
this.
okay, thank you.
It, you know, if we're gonna talk with, the advisory committee's gonna give us their input on these 3 articles. It might be useful at that point to ask someone from the sewer commission to be present to simply personally explain this.
Yes. I just need to coordinate with the chairman when he wants to schedule that.
Okay, fair enough.
But I agree, it's just
Okay,
a scheduling issue.
yep.
The way things are backing up, we may want to discuss other dates too.
Right, well,
That's a whole other subject.
we have
I know.
our next scheduled meeting, taking out the Collins Center is the 19th, which also could be brought up in that because of the 3 dates that we were talking about were the 18th, 19th, and 20th. But
Well,
we still could take a first half hour of business. We have a tax classification hearing being published for the 19th, which is 10 to 15 minutes long. And it seems to me we could do 15 minutes of water and sewer, which would just leave us one article after that to deal with.
The 18th is not listed as a date on our,
There was a typo on that, Steve caught that. It should have been
the 18th, okay.
18th, yeah.
Yeah.
That was my mistake. We were not meeting on Sunday, but it was Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm thinking that, the first half hour of the 19th, we could just try to cram in as much of the, housekeeping stuff we need to deal with.
Okay.
Okay, which brings us to, the Collins Center.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
So the
Yep.
19th, you want to have water and sewer, so a representative from water and sewer come to the selectmen's meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll do the,
Peter, when are you meeting?
14th, yeah, okay. Well, we did have Peter earlier on the water. Is it necessary to have him back again?
Karen asked for him.
Oh, no, I just wanted to know if we
I
had
think if we get the
additional
numbers on a
information.
spreadsheet of,
Yeah.
you know, we had the framework of what the numbers are, we
Yeah.
understand that. We just want to confirm that there's, you know, what, as they get refined down, that they're in the range that was discussed. And where the other transfers into water stabilization and sewer stabilization, how much are they looking at? You know, what are the actual numbers? Because right now they're,
So it sounds like you actually want to encourage members, if they're desired, to go to the advisory committee and hear the live presentation.
yes,
And you
yeah,
want to have in your packets on Friday what their final numbers are, so you can vote that on the 19th.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I plan to go anyways, if no, and maybe you should post if more than, and a majority wants to go.
Well, you can go, you just can't
You don't
deliberate.
have to
Well,
post it,
wait,
just
I
not
won't,
make any
I won't
decisions.
deliberate.
Well,
No,
that-
we don't deliberate.
Yeah, then you're fine. All
Yeah.
5 of you can
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
It's a public meeting.
okay.
Okay, so I won't plan to have someone here on the 19th for water and sewer,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
unless told otherwise.
yeah, okay,
Peter, that's at 7?
yeah, 7.
And Peter, you'll invite water and sewer to come to 14th.
I'm just getting that in my calendar, hold on a second. 7 PM, right?
Yep,
No need.
You're not deliberating.
Yeah.
They were not deliberating there.
We just want to hear the presentation.
No, but I mean, could we?
yeah.
If we post it, we could.
Well, no, I think.
Well, we could post a meeting if we want to make a decision that night.
I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, depending on what the following week plays out.
Well, you know, it might not be a bad idea to just post the meeting.
That's what I was thinking, and, yeah, because then.
So I'll
then
post,
It's then we have
Well-
flexibility.
Because if they get done, let's,
I don't want to
I don't
have a
wanna,
joint meeting.
I agree,
Yeah,
but-
yeah,
No.
Let them
But
do
if
their work, you can observe it.
yeah,
And
Okay.
as long as you don't have any questions,
think
you can
it's-
vote these out in 3 minutes on the
yes,
19th.
yeah, yeah.
got it. All right.
Mm.
So the 19th, tops 5 to 10 minutes discussion. If there's no controversy, we should be able to vote it, yeah. Okay. On the Collins Center, everybody got the latest communication. We're gonna be meeting on the 13th, which is a Wednesday night here at 7 PM.
I have just a couple little
Yeah.
questions. I don't know if we know the answers to this, and we may have been told and have forgotten. But, when they come, when Collins Center comes on the 13th, they're gonna be presenting us with X number of finalists.
Yeah.
Are those finalists going to, at that point, know they're finalists?
Yeah, because we were asked, did we agree to interview everybody? So nobody wanted to be a finalist if they were just gonna get
Thrown out their
disclosed on the
name and then,
13th,
right.
but not interviewed. So, so we made a commitment to interview,
Whomever gets presented to
Right.
us.
and so they, at that point, they would have to know that they're finalists, yeah.
Right, okay. So once that meeting takes place, then we can immediately begin to get the interviews scheduled.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll, which then brings up like a staffing issue. It's,
Yep.
what's the best way to accomplish that? I mean,
I've given this a fair amount of thought, incorporating Dick Kobayashi's memo
Yep.
into it. And if you just indulge me for a minute, Diane, would you pass those down? It's a proposal
Yep.
for you, for your consideration, and I'm sorry.
It's always helpful to get these ahead of time.
Well, you would have gotten it ahead of time, but I was still typing it today, so.
The first thing I should have said, Steve, was thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank
The basis, as you can read, the highlights are pretty straightforward. Under the Town Manager Act, we are charged with the selection of the town manager. Of course, we hired Collins Center to recruit, screen, and select the finalists. And now that the Collins Center has finished their assignment and is about to present them to us, we have to determine the process we use to evaluate them. The Collins Center has provided us guidance, though no specific process for how we should conduct interviews, evaluate, and identify candidates for the best fit. And, we are all aware that the results of past town manager recruitments have been mixed. Much of the criticism about those past recruitments is centered on the lack of a documented process for interviewing and the failure of previous boards of selectmen to incorporate the results of the interviews into the final selections of candidates. The gist of it is as follows. We need to hit this one out of the park. We need to find from the candidates, if they are suitable, the one who will fit best. And I believe that we need a process for doing that. I'm not trying to overuse the P word, but the process in this case, I think, needs to go beyond a single interview with the finalists at one sitting here. Because we have to recognize that person works both up to the board, yet at the same time works throughout the community with the departments and committees and boards and the residents. So figuring out which person is most uniquely qualified is going to take more than a single interview if we hope to do it successfully. So the process that I'm recommending actually fits within our calendar, incorporates our first interview, in which I propose that we actually look at the questions that we ask and individually rank the answers of each candidate and compile them so that we have collectively a group understanding of how each of us have viewed each candidate. Okay? The second stage of this, flip the page, second stage of this anticipates interviews with department groups and stakeholders. The department groups are public safety, finance, social services, schools, the enterprise funds, advisory, and CBC chairs. The idea here is, again, that the role of a town manager intersects with each of these and on a regular and daily basis if that town manager is going to be successful. The review that those stakeholders take of each of those candidates should be consolidated and anonymous. Obviously, the selected candidate ought never know if an employee by name has said, I liked someone else better. But the review from those folks could be extraordinarily helpful in informing us. We see the town manager from one view. Stakeholders see a town manager from an entirely different view. And their input, I think, is critical. Not determinative, that's still the decision that rests here, but critical. And then the final step, of course, is week 4. And ideally, by this point, we have identified the top 2 candidates and can make a decision from there or reach a decision from there. But that's the basic idea of this. And the objective, as I said, is to not try and limit our own scope of expertise to one 75-minute meeting with one of 5 candidates, but recognize that what we're trying to do is push this through a funnel to determine who is the best fit for our community based upon the candidates available. And I have gone on to put together a chart of some of the types of some of the ways that we might format asking questions of a candidate such that each of us could formulate responses. Now, these questions, by the way, are just general. I would suggest that we go back to the profile, identifying what we saw as important, which is actually Mr. Kobayashi's recommendation, and formulate the questions based upon that.
Did Kobayashi, they gave us a list of
They gave
questions.
us
There was
list
a
of
bunch of questions, yeah.
Well, it
Which
meant-
I find, just a minute, his questions, having been a pro at doing this, probably get to the nub of the problem.
Many of the questions that Mr. Kobayashi talks about, as he points out specifically, are relatively general in nature. And we might want to ask things which are much more refined towards the needs of the town. However, he also points out that we probably shouldn't try to stray too far from the profile, because in fact, that's what has been studied by the candidates.
Right.
Right. Go ahead, Martha.
I just don't think, interviews with everybody is germane to the issue. It just, we're doing the hiring. I've been involved with hiring for many different government agencies, and you just don't do that. I think it's fine after you've hired somebody to have them interview with the people to find out what they're interested, but it waters down our interview process, because after all,
We don't have an interview process.
well, we do.
No, we
We have
don't.
the questions. We can set it up. We can set it up.
What is
But I
it, though?
don't think we should be having have the candidates interviewing with everybody in the town. That's kind of ridiculous.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, they're not interviewing with everybody in the town,
Well,
but
you've got
rather
Liz
having.
here. Obviously, you're trying to delay the process. That's what I think. I look at this.
First of all, Martha, please,
Well, it looks
don't,
like
don't,
it.
don't,
That's my first, you can explain to me a little bit more that, when you see this. I
you
mean,
know,
we have-
Martha, if you're gonna make the accusation, I wish you
Okay,
put some
let's
evidence
everybody
behind
just,
it.
like, let's just,
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate the accusation, Martha.
Well, it looks
I,
like it.
yeah, you're right. I spent 4 hours out of my workday putting this together because I want to delay something. I'm sorry. I ran for this office so that I could represent the town and find some success here. I do believe that we need a process in order to find the most qualified and best fit for this town. If you don't agree with that approach, then I would appreciate it if you'd put forward your own process.
Well, I think we've started with this. I think I can understand what you've done this, but having been involved with the process we've done before, I feel doing the way we were doing, interviewing with them, and then eliminating and jumping to week 4 and interviewing the 2 top candidates.
Do you recall with our last town manager, our last permanent town manager, what the primary disruption was?
I wasn't involved with that. I didn't pay.
Did you read the papers?
I read some of it.
Right. There was a great deal of internal strife between boards and committees, management groups. It was clear that there was not a fit.
Well,
What I'm trying to do is avoid the same problem. Now, if you have another resolution to do that, I'd appreciate it.
well, in the past, the ones that have been done, there hasn't been this
Really?
problem.
well, can I just say something? I mean, we all agreed that, you know, when conceptually, we've been talking about week 1, where we have we're interviewing 4 or 5 candidates, and so the question is, what are we doing after that? And this covers every scenario. I just want to throw out, there could be a scenario that when we rate all of us individually, who we think our top 3 are, where we find that it is really clear to us that there's 1 or 2 candidates that we're really interested
That's
in.
what I
Mr.
mean.
Chairman,
Yeah.
I take nothing away from that.
Yeah.
My fit of pique at the moment is being accused of delaying,
No.
and that's where I
Well,
really get off.
we're in the brainstorming here,
That's-
where people are making observations, and, you know, we just have to be more open to whatever observations. I appreciate all the hard work you've done on this,
Appreciate
Steve.
the work you did.
Delaying?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just on this, I mean, one of the steps that we haven't done
Yeah,
is we didn't form a screening committee, which is typically formed of the kind of people that might take on the secondary
right.
secondary interview process. And so I don't know, and I've been doing this research for over a year now. I don't know of a town that hasn't included some degree of stakeholders in the interview process, other than the appointing authority, which is the Board of Selectmen. So I absolutely positively, I don't know the best way to do that, but I would never agree to a process that didn't include having an opportunity for some townspeople or committee folks or especially employees to have some say in the process.
Well, absolutely, and I agree. Can I just,
But the way
real
to
quick,
do
and
it,
then,
the way to
I
do it.
I think there, there's some options there. One option would be after the first set of interviews, that we have all these stakeholders in, and we take testimony and observations from people, and
So, just
Could
on,
I suggest
Yeah.
something? Well, first of all, we sat here one night and we discussed what we were gonna do and whether we were gonna have a screening committee or not. And the board as a whole, or a majority, I can't remember what the vote was,
I think it was unanimous on
I think
that,
it was
yeah.
unanimous, decided that because of the political climate in town today, because of the division within the committees and boards, that we would remove politics from the process. That was the underlying rationale for having Collins be the screening committee. I am very loath that division, that negativity, that divisiveness exists very strongly within some members of our town government. And I would be very, I would not want to introduce that element into this process. I might suggest, or I would suggest, what we might do is, since the interviews are an open meeting, our interviews of each candidate are an open meeting, members of the public, we could schedule it in another room, we could go up to the library or to the superintendent's room where it can still be televised, so that if committee members and others can come, observe, and then submit their comments and recommendations anonymously to the board for us, and then we would not even know where they were coming from, then we could consider those in our process.
I personally think it would be a huge mistake not to include and have an opportunity for some, especially some segment of the employees, whether it's department heads or the people that are gonna be working with this person on a day-to-day basis. I submit that a lot of the politics are at this table and not necessarily elsewhere in the town government. I think that's where it primarily exists. I really think there needs to be some process of engagement for department heads and a few key other folks. I
Well,
really do.
I just think that if we were going to do that, we should have had a screening process, a screening committee.
But the screening committee, it was because we all wouldn't have been able to agree on who that initial screening
Right,
thing
but
was. This is the person, these are the
Mr.
5 finalists
Chairman,
that are
please
gonna
excuse me,
run
but
this
I do
town.
want to respond, Diane. While there is politics among the 5 of us here at this desk, and that has been made very clear in the media, that also exists on other boards and committees. And I think that it's disingenuous to try to imply that it is only the 5 people sitting here.
I'm primarily focused on employees, just for the record.
I don't think I do not, you did not hear me say employees.
No, I know, I'm just saying, I want them to make sure that some of them have an opportunity to participate in the interview process. That's my number one, goal.
I tell you what, since this was a piece of work that I had assembled, let me go back to the reason that I laid this out the way I did. And in doing so, if anybody can craft a better method of achieving the same objective, I'm quite willing to listen to it.
Okay, that's
I
good.
should
Let's
say-
talk about
I'm
your
sorry, not
goal
I'm
at
quite willing to
each
listen to it. I
week.
think
Yeah.
the town should listen to it. And the goal in the second phase was to acknowledge that the issues that we have run into in the past, and I'm not talking about one town manager, but two, and actually three now that I think about it, had difficulties dealing with either specific managers under their purview or people generally, and therein lay the issue.
I disagree. I'll agree with you on the last one, but not on the others.
Karen, not the, I'm going back to one who was dismissed for personal misconduct. I'm going, so
But that-
there
that-
apparently was
I-
a difficulty there.
That was personal
There was
misconduct.
another one who I was extraordinarily fond of, but who frankly could not get along with the finance
Let's
director.
talk, instead of
To the point.
in generality,
To the point that.
instead of individuals.
The objective in doing this is to try and determine that person who would have best fit. Now, look,
But-
I don't know that this is the best way to do it. I don't know that. But I do know that that's an objective I sure would like to achieve, because I don't believe that even in our best, with our best intent, we can definitively decide that that the person that we're selecting is beyond a shadow of a doubt the best option that we have. I do believe that we can benefit from the input that we're going to get from outside of this room and these 5 people. That's the point, okay? And that's what what I was trying to achieve with this piece.
What we want is much participation through observation of the interviews of all the stakeholders. I guess the question is, and we can ask Dick Kobayashi this when he comes in, is what is the best way to deal with that issue which you're talking about, is the kind of the people person quality of a manager that has to deal with all levels of public, boards, employees, vendors, you name it, the whole gamut.
So,
How do we best make sure that we're covering that base?
so two things on this, which I think address, I mean, Dick Kobayashi mentioned it in the memo that we got. Two things he suggested, and I think Steve was trying to address this, was, and again, I don't know what the right mechanism is,
Yeah.
but the Board of Selectmen might consider arranging to have selected citizens or staff ask questions. If so, appropriate time needs to be allocated. If this course is followed, the same questions must be asked of each candidate. So I think that's an
That
important
would
thing.
be expanding the 5 of us, which I would be in favor of, if we're willing to, like,
Well,
That's it. We should
time
be
must be
asking
allocated, and
questions,
I
yes.
would argue that it's something that should take place away from our interviews.
okay, but let me just make a point, because
no,
I'm,
no.
hold on. I like the idea of anonymous input to us, and I'm thinking if we had a way to have one individual have anonymous questions, but they're asking the same questions as almost a 6th selectman. In other words, they would represent all these stakeholders. We don't know who's asking the question, but they have to ask those same questions through all interviews. And then we still allow the anonymous input after that, but that would at least get a lot of these stakeholders in on the questioning,
So, and, you know.
if
he-
you follow
Or
me.
Yeah,
Or
and
they
he-
could submit to us the questions to ask.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, whether we, you know, I think especially with employees, I think they're gonna be hesitant to come to a public meeting with a future boss and ask a question. So, you know, maybe we ask for input, maybe we ask for some member of the staff to call questions and come and represent just a global question. There's all kinds of references to having individualized meetings with some of these people on the day that they come, or another day, because it's interesting, because it talked about sometimes it's valuable to arrange for board members to chat and gain familiarity, or have them sit down with colleagues in departments. So the question is, when do we do that? Because, you know, it's in the initial schedule that he gave us, which was a one-day schedule, it wouldn't have really been possible to make that happen. So you know,
As I remember the last one, we split up a
correct.
couple of selectmen with a candidate and had a late lunch
For the-
before the meeting,
So what we did, I think, is,
and a little
was
tour.
once we got the finalists,
Yeah,
once we
yeah,
took
yeah.
the 5 to 2,
Yes, yeah.
and then we did that, and we had them meet with, you know, we went over to DPW and had them meet with Carl
They
and
came-
talk to
right,
Mary and do
right.
that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
then the staff, some of the staff,
Gave input.
gave input. And we had the committee, some of the committee people involved in the screening. So that's the piece that's been missing here. So we just have to figure out what the best way to get the stakeholders to
Not to
to
be
involved.
not to be argumentative, but that's the process you followed last time, and that's the process you keep saying was flawed.
I don't know so much that the process was flawed, to be honest with you, as the outcome.
Well, if the outcome was flawed, the process was
Right.
flawed.
Well, I'll tell you an well, I won't go there, but,
Well, you
you
see-
know, if I had listened to some of the people on the staff in town hall at that time, I might have made some different
Well, I
choices.
just don't think we need 2 weeks to do this. It draws it out. That's my point.
I think we have to understand too that this is a very aggressive schedule in a hall, you know, we're gonna, these candidates aren't gonna be even known to us until next Wednesday. And then we're planning to have them interviewed within the next 5 days after that, you know, so it's aggressive as it is, and I don't think we should be and Dick Kobayashi has said this to me, when I first called him last, whatever it was, May. He said, don't be afraid of time. Just do it right. And we're not trying to delay this. We all want to put this to bed, believe me. Because there are important things that we have been distracted from addressing. But we have got to just do this the right way, as opposed to, it's too much time.
Well, to Karen's point, if we looked at the process last time, do we think we could have done better with that
Yeah.
process?
Ask different questions, and I would like to have us maybe schedule time after we meet with the Collins Center next week. One thing I would like us to do is maybe each of us go home, read the
Questions.
recommended questions,
Yeah,
tailor them to Cohasset, knowing what we know are the priorities of the town and what are in the town profile, and come back with 4 questions each, knowing that each of us will get 2, and maybe 3 of us will have the same question, so I'll say, I'll ask them the one about this. But I think we need to really substantively think about what we're asking.
What I think, I agree, Diane,
Yeah.
and what I'd like to suggest is that whatever we decide on inclusion, I would like to, set a date to have, employees, committee members, submit questions for consideration by the board.
That's
So
a very
that-
good question.
Yep.
So that we, and members of the public also, so, Michael, do you think it might be possible to, I know it's possible, could we, put an email address up on the web where people could email their questions in, and then perhaps Tracy or Jen could, just as we did with the 3A study?
Why don't you have the questions emailed to Tracy and then she can compile them? That'd be the easiest.
yeah, and we don't have to know
Yeah.
who's asking them, just
Yeah,
kind
we
of
don't
what
need-
they
yeah,
are
yeah.
generally,
That's a
yeah.
good idea, yeah.
And the other thing is, I keep losing focus on this. Steve, on your matrix, which is really great, and obviously you've put a lot of thought and effort into doing this, but one of the things that I recall from the interview with Mr. Kobayashi here was when you asked a question about a grid and a rating, was that some of the most important qualities cannot be quantified this way.
Right.
And
No, and the
so I
big-
think that we need to take that into consideration also, in addition to, and if I might, just as like relating an experience, when we were interviewing candidates for the interim town manager, after all the selectmen, after we interviewed everyone, the selectmen, I can't remember exactly whether it was the next meeting or that night, but anyway, everybody picked their top three, say my memory fails me, and the ultimate candidate was in the top one or two
For
of each
everybody.
of the 5 candidates. So that made it very clear then, it was between one or two people, so.
There's a reason for the grid, and it's not that you can assemble a future town manager by the numbers, but rather that this memorializes for you, and then for the board as we look at each of these candidates, what it was that we thought was particularly powerful in any one of them, or particularly deficient in any one of them. And it serves as a point of reference.
And
Not
is
a vote.
everybody seeing it the same way? Yeah.
The candidate A, scored high marks across the board with everybody with regard to financial management, but 3 out of 5 thought less of that person's capabilities with regard to human resources experience, okay? That's the basis for doing it, because
No, I
it gives a point of reference for that further discussion.
No, I understand that.
And this, I remember this from, we had a grid last time too, and it was really helpful for that reason,
I think
because the
it's good.
truth of the matter is, as much as we're gonna warm up to all these people, things are gonna start, we're gonna hear the same, we're asking the same questions of 5 people with significant municipal
Well, you have to have
experience.
some way to track it.
Right, we're
Yeah,
gonna
absolutely.
get a lot of the same answers, and they've probably been asked the same
Right.
questions in other towns, so, so
One
I
of
do think this is helpful, just one
One of
real-
the other things that I'd like to propose, and it's only a proposal, and if people don't like it, I'm not gonna get a fit a peek, that, we each review the resumes of the candidates before we interview them and rank them. Because some people will be very good on paper, but maybe they don't interview that well. And I think it's important to have that perspective.
To your point about the grid too, it is the qualitative, and that was one thing that I have regrets from the last time, was I didn't spend time, that one-on-one time, and I think when you're parading one person in after another, and they're all they're gonna bring their A game, let's hope, if they've made it this far, they're probably gonna be very compelling candidates. It's sitting in a room and having a cup of coffee, or just having them sit down and meet with the fire chief and the police chief, or whatever. I think that piece has to happen. I don't
I
know
think-
when, but it has to happen, because that is when you just get that read, that qualitative sense of.
Is that, I'm just throwing this out as
Yeah.
a question, is that more important for all 5 candidates, or for, say, a final 2 candidates?
I don't know the answer to
They-
And
that.
I think I agree
think
with you, Steve.
No, the whole objective between the first series of interviews and that second vetting phase, if you will, is to cull the list. Ideally, if we're receiving 5 candidates, I think by the time to get to week 2, we should collectively be no more than 3. Ideally, and the reason I wouldn't go to 2 is, I think somewhere between week 2 and the finals, you probably lose 1, either by that candidate withdrawing, or by receiving another job offer, for whatever reason.
Right.
They potentially will fall out of the mix.
Which we've been warned.
And look, and I go back to Mr. Kobayashi's statement as well, don't be afraid of time. Here's the other thing. What happens if, even though these might be qualified candidates, no one of them seems appropriate to any one of us? In other words, it just doesn't work.
Well, I think it might be.
That is also a potential outcome, not one that any of us would like to see, but it's a potential outcome.
Certainly not wouldn't like to see, but I again will put my trust in the professionalism and the experience of the Collins Center, that they would not bring candidates forward to us that either were inexperienced, or that in their estimation, having talked with all the, not only just the Board of Selectmen, but the town committees, would be a bad fit for Cohasset.
Did you ever
so.
have a disastrous blind date set up by your good friend?
No.
It happens.
Well, I think, Steve, when you look at the background that we're requiring, experience, and if they're been acting town managers or have they've gone through a lot of batteries, so maybe the chances that we won't like one at least is less possible, I
Martha,
think.
I'm not wishing it upon us. I'm just,
You're being practical.
I've lived through 3 once-in-a-lifetime events now.
Yeah.
Okay? And I'm not I'm nothing if not cynical. And it can happen. My point in all of this is that time is not something that we should allow to pressure our decision on this if our objective is finding the best fit. And if that means that we have to try and arrange another week, squeeze another week to put that person or this group of people in front of stakeholders, define who those might be. I do believe it will help us to refine our choice and help us to ensure a greater likelihood of success. That's all.
There's another piece here that Dick talked about at one point, but was actually going into the community of, and
That's
with
what I
was-
one or
that-
two selectmen.
That's what I was going to say.
And where does that fit in with this? It's got, what, for lack of a better description, the
Well, I
vetting
think you-
process.
Where does it, I
for
mean,
us,
are you
yeah.
asking about the
Well,
time-wise?
yeah, I mean, there's, I think these are all important areas that we need to discuss, you know,
Is-
there's.
Yeah.
Is
no,
it
I
the
agree.
5 people that we bring into the community, or is it the
think-
whatever, the
What-
whittle
what
down
you
the 2?
do,
It's-
and
I think it's
which
the
makes it more
whittles.
successful, you have two selectmen go visit a community.
And that's the other piece, yeah.
Yeah, and that you really should do. I think that
Yes.
is more critical.
I,
even-
I think in
Because if
here,
you have the townspeople and department heads listening to our interviewing process, they may pick up things that we don't, and they can anonymously give information.
I'll-
And I
I'll-
think that's,
Right,
I don't know where
all of this is,
I don't know where I read it, but
It's
I.
in there.
It is.
It's in that.
No, but it also says that with the permission of the candidate.
Yes,
yes,
yeah,
you
yeah.
have
Yes.
to do that.
Right.
Yes, that's on the
Obviously.
fair.
So
Fairly,
that,
And the candidates
may be
know
an
we're
interview
doing
question
this.
that we would want to ask, just to clear that during the
Clear that
interview.
with Bill
One of the
Yardley.
questions, would you mind if a subcommittee of the selectmen visited your community and just got a feel?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just to
Okay.
try to come up with some marching orders.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I would love to have this process kind of on paper, as best as we can, and thank you, Steve, for everything you did.
Yeah.
My one thing for next week is I would like to know that we're gonna discuss the actual protocol, the actual questioning. And that we each look at the questions that Dick sent us, and I would plead to try to personalize them a little bit to Cohasset as best as possible, because, again, you know, the Collins Center is doing four or five of these town manager, town administrator searches every quarter, and I'm sure all the questions are fairly similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
And-
they do say, focus on how the person's knowledge and experience would relate to Cohasset context, not to highly specific situations.
Agreed, we're not
Yeah.
gonna ask them what they think about
Yeah.
the police chief
Which-
situation,
yeah.
or none of that, but just exactly.
So that kind of, to me, like one issue would be the HR. I think we always have to
Exactly.
take it out because it's such a big issue for us right
No,
now.
I don't know
Well,
about that.
No,
Well,
I think it's fair to.
To ask
that-
them how they've handled it in the past, but
Right.
what would you do in Cohasset?
No, 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 no.
Correct.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
at what point did you become involved would be
Yeah.
an example of that, as opposed to being.
So
how
here's
would
what
you-
I'm thinking. Would it make sense for us to get the Collins Center questions up on the web so everybody can look at them and then say, what are we missing here? For all the
No,
townspeople that are interested in saying, hey, I want to put some questions in. Here's everything Collins Center has, and they could look at them and say, you know what, but then, here's a question I think is important that's not on there.
Can I make before we get to that point?
Yeah.
I believe we as a committee need to refine what it is we want to ask. And although we have areas of suggested questioning
Yeah.
by the Kobayashi, Mr. Kobayashi recommended, you know, Karen may have something in particular that she wants to focus on, or Martha, or you, or,
Yeah.
you know, Diane and myself. If we could refine that
We
set
have
of
to.
questions initially, before we just wallpaper with them,
Yeah,
I think it would be helpful, because it's going to help us to think about how we're going to approach each candidate, how we'd like to, and then, as you said previously, if the, you know, if the input from the community at large and the employees comes through a separate set of questions, then those could come forward simultaneously, but they should be separate from ours.
oh, yeah,
Well, I think, I think that I would disagree a little bit, Steve, in that I think the questions should all be integrated so that it shouldn't be obvious that the questions are coming either from the employees or from a
Sty-
committee or from just,
Stylistically, however the board opts to handle it is fine, Karen. What I was what I'm trying to describe is that the board should define the questions that we are looking to ask,
right.
first and foremost, because this is our judgment and our hire. This is why we ran for this office.
Oh, absolutely. But I'm just wondering if we asked people, if people wanted to make a comment, to submit a question or, you know, express a concern, if they would submit it no later than, say, noon on Monday, the 11th, that gives Tracy some time to compile and give to us maybe on the 12th, and then we,
I'm trying to remember how many questions we had last time, was it 3 or 4?
I think we each asked 2.
2,
Yeah.
okay,
yeah, it
so,
can't be a
I have
gazillion
all my
questions.
notes.
Questions,
Yeah.
and you got, you know, and you've
Yeah.
got 75 minutes to do this in,
Which
and
isn't
you've
a
got a
lot.
lot
Yeah,
of time
yeah.
for response.
So, I think just because the Monday's the holiday, that maybe we could ask for
Oh, I
the,
forgot about the
for
holiday.
to get them by the 12th. And I don't know, I mean, I think we should,
Well-
can just ask.
well, it'd be
for
helpful to
them
have
and then-
something that we could look at on a list and say, you know what? I'd rather give up my number 2 question
Right.
for this.
Except
Right.
I think we should still ask our 2 questions.
Yeah,
I think I think if there's some unique perspective that's coming from outside.
Well, it
this-
doesn't mean that all the questions that come into us are going to get asked.
Oh,
but there-
absolutely.
But there might be some unique
Right.
insight, somebody hits on something that we say, oh, yeah, hey, that's an important.
And that becomes an extra question,
And that becomes.
you know, so we each ask 2.
But it also allows us to get some input from committee people, townspeople, and employees as to what their concerns are, and what they think is important in the town manager, which would help us to compile our questions.
To form that protocol, does that make sense? And then we discuss that, you know, if we have any specific questions on how to ask certain questions, or we
Okay,
can
so,
discuss
so
that
what I'm hearing is that
next
we're gonna
Wednesday.
take the Collins Center questions and go through it and do any massaging we need to do that we think we wanna recommend, or but we're also gonna look at picking 4 of those, of which 2 would like to keep, and then we wanna see where the crossovers are, so that we're ending up with
2 questions.
2.
So we're
And-
gonna come to the next
Yeah,
meeting.
it's almost like, well, I guess we can do this at the tail end of the next meeting.
Right.
The next meeting being next week with the
Thursday.
Collins
Wednesday,
Center.
yes, yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
there's a question I was thinking of, and I'd like to ask Collins Center, is this,
So we'll have input from anybody in the community, or town government, or employees, through Tracy. Plus, we'll all have
Come
a
up with what
pretty
we
good
wanna talk
idea of
about.
what we want out of our questions.
right?
Well, I think the grid,
So we should be prepared that night, at the end of that night, to each know what 2 questions we're asking the following week.
Choreography's
Yeah,
done
yeah.
by the end of next
Yeah.
meeting. Yep.
I
The
think,
choreography for those initial interviews.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think the grid that Steve on the questions was very good.
yes, yeah.
That's excellent, excellent.
That's a good way to
Well, I-
record our
Very
feelings
good.
on
I'm sure it's
strengths.
excellent, but I need some time to understand it, to read it.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you read it, but
the-
still,
the-
it's a process.
It's broken down, when you read through it, Karen, you'll see it's broken down by subject areas.
I see that, but I need to.
And again, this is, you know, it reflects things that I'd like to ask. May not be in common with everybody else here at the table, but there are I think when we refine the questions that we would ask each of the candidates, we'd probably be able to break them down into fairly broad subject areas. After that, it's a matter of recording your perceptions of agreeing upon that, that particular candidate's answers. So,
Well, another, not to
Yeah, go ahead.
throw another monkey wrench in. Another thing, well, no, never mind, bad idea.
So do we feel we have enough clarity now to have a productive work session at the tail end of the 13th meeting?
Yeah, I think so.
With,
Abs-
on
think so.
questions?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The only remaining thing is where do we go from
What's-
there? And
what's the
maybe,
process after
maybe
that?
the next process after that.
Yeah.
Maybe we wrap that into, once we have a handle on the questions and what's come in from the public,
Well, I think yeah, I mean, I think we need to take it step by step also, but it's good that we're talking about the frame of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I think after the interviews, we need a short work session of like what, framing more fully the next step,
Okay.
and the next several steps. Although Steve's given us great framework to
To
look
start
at
with.
everything, yeah.
Excellent.
Could an email be sent out to, well, to department heads, I guess, and to the chairs of committees, or asking for their input before our meeting next week?
Yeah,
Don't
and
see why
sending the
not.
comments to Tracy.
Yeah, I think you should author that email.
Yeah,
It should be
yeah.
from you,
Okay, yeah.
from you as chairman,
Mhm.
just that the board is seeking input
Mhm.
and Tracy can get it out. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
yeah.
Because we are
Well,
ultimately
let
the
me
appointed
draft
authority.
something, and then I'll have you look at it for English.
Grammatical
and-
errors.
Yes.
For the vocabulary.
Such a geek. I'm not even that good. And then the only other thing is, just in terms of, the actual technical administrative procedure.
Yeah,
So we'll get the names on Wednesday, and then Thursday, we need to be, and I guess it would be Tracy, or we need to figure out, we need to call all these people, these 5 finalists up and say, can you come in on Monday, Tuesday, and or Wednesday
yeah,
of next week
yeah,
for an hour interview,
right.
Well, I think we have to pick 2 days,
right?
because you could end up with some people on
3 days.
all 3 days.
Right.
Well, it's definitely some type of staff work, or end up falling on me of what their availability is on, out of those 3 days, and can we have 3 one night and 2 another night?
Was there a reason Thursday wasn't in the mix?
someone had a problem with it.
Someone had an issue, yeah.
Probably me.
And I get mixed messages on Dick Kobayashi at one point saying that they sometimes did it, but they're done basically
They're done, I mean,
Wednesday night,
I don't know
so.
if we could prevail upon them to set up the appointments, but,
He did say something about he would check their availability,
yeah.
so he may be able to convey to us on the 13th that
Yeah,
these, the nights each one can attend.
Then he might have
would-
already
yeah,
done
yeah.
that, okay.
right.
Yeah, I have a conflict on the 21st, so with
Okay.
me,
We don't
yeah.
have the 21st, we've 20.
No,
No,
I know,
we
I
was
was
someone
just asking,
asking why
'cause-
we didn't have the 21st.
Okay. All right, well, we'll go from here.
We ready to move on?
Yep.
Town manager update? Thanks, Steve, for all your work.
Okay. First item I have is from the harbor master. And I received this today from the harbor master. It's a memo regarding the Parker Ave boat ramp. In the memo, there's been some questions as to why there's the bottom stop block at the end of the ramp, and why that's been done and why it's been changed. Her memo goes through to clarify that, Cohasset has never had a low tide boat ramp, just because of the elevation of the ramp off of the back river. I'm sorry, not the back river, off of Parker Ave. In there was a lot of washout that you'll see in some of the pictures that are attached. So it was decided last year to go forward and actually do a repair to the ramp. In doing that repair, we can only stay within the same paved area as what was originally approved by DEP and the Conservation Commission. In addition to that, the regulatory bodies are now requiring this curb to be put at the back so that the trailers don't back off of the ramp, or the trailers in the car don't keep on going, which has been happening, then you have an environmental issue. So that's, what the lip is there for. This is also similar to apparently what is consistent in Hingham and also in Situate. And their ramps are also not available at the very low tides. So basically, when you're pulling your boat up or putting it in, you need to plan accordingly and, plus an hour on the low tide, avoid that time for pulling up your boat. So this is, again, a memo from her to address the issue that some have asked.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
I would just like to say that going back, even before the Harbor Health Committee, but going back as far as the Harbor Health Committee, Lori Gibbons, as Harbor Master, has always performed exemplary. She goes over and above the call of duty. She tries to accommodate people as much as she can. She does require people to obey the rules and regulations, but she will try to work with people. And I appreciate very much the dedication, but also the consideration she tries to give to boat owners and other citizens of the town, and also to the transient boat owners who come in during the season. And the town has received, over the years, a significant number of letters in regard to thanking Lori for her assistance in different areas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Yep. So what I'm hearing, Mike, is that these blocks are placed at the low tide mark in many communities, and it's where they're supposed to be.
Correct.
Yeah. I having dropped my boat in and taken it out any number of times up the ramp, the fact of the matter is that, you get a new moon tide, or, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but basically on the quarter, the moon on the quarter, spring, summer, fall, winter, you're gonna get huge gradients, and it shallows out pretty rapidly. You can back your trailer. Before this block was there, you could back it right into the abyss, and you were never going to get it out.
Thus the cement block.
The trailer
Yeah.
keeps searching for water, but
Yeah.
it gets
Yep.
plenty of it after a while.
Yeah.
Lori hits it right on the head. We've always, as far as I've known, and if you go back with the folks who have truly long history in this town, we've always had problems launching or pulling boats on the low tide. And it doesn't matter whether or not we've done it at the Parker Ave ramp or the one down by the
Yeah.
yacht club, whatever. So, I'm sorry to hear about the disappointment that some folks have had in the past. And we have also had the possibility of rolling the trailer off the side of the ramp and sneaking it in that way. But as Lori points out, that's a non-starter these days as well.
Michael,
So,
I'm
no,
sorry.
I'm done.
So there was a citizen who had sent us an email. Could this be forwarded to him?
It can, it will.
Thank you.
One other public service announcement that's important that she wants to make sure is clearly known by all is that what degrades the ramp is when boats power on or power off. You are not allowed to power your boat on, so don't drive your boat onto the trailer, and then when you hit the trailer with, several hundred horsepower, rev it up so it just drives straight up,
Right.
which has happened. And what happens is when those engines are churning up the water, they're sending all of the sand, all of the pebbles, all of the bigger rocks are just getting caught in that turbulence and being pushed out into the center of the channel. And then that's what you see in the pictures here, is from that happening too many times, which has degraded that. And she will be looking to institute fines for when that happens, because that destroys the ramp. And it's also illegal. to do that on a state level. So that's
Oh,
where
that
we stand with
clarifies
the
that,
rec.
thank you.
Next item is that the Army Corps of Engineers is back in business. We're going to be having a meeting shortly with all the different state regulators to go over our next steps. And so the good news is that's back on track. There's another public service announcement. The Cohasset Elder Affairs is having their sauce-off on Wednesday, November 13th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the Lightkeeper's House. And you'll be able to sample 3 different spaghetti sauces prepared by Nancy, Liza, and Richie. And there's a suggested donation of $5, and you get to vote and pick the winner. And the last item that I have is that we just received a very positive response from Jerry Perry, the Director of Accounts at the Mass Department of Revenue. And he basically commends the finance team for the work that we've done. And just to repeat 3 sentences, he states that I have confidence in the current appointed officials who oversee the Cohasset town finances. Cohasset has improved our financial position over the last 2 years. Your current appointed officials can properly give you and your Board of Selectmen the options you seek to make an appropriate public policy decision. And he strongly suggests that we discuss these matters with the current town manager and town accountant, as they are aware of all state finance laws and can recommend what is in the best interest of Cohasset. So it's nice to see the person that had Cohasset on our DOR watch list a few years ago has, clearly articulated, his approval of what's happening here in Cohasset. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Selectman comment. Martha?
Yeah, I went to a fundraiser for the Rotary last night at Bia, and they raised quite a sum. I'm not quite sure. Rich didn't quite know it. And I just wanted to reiterate that Rotary gives all this money out, and they are giving it to Polio Plus, which they initiated and was taken over or added to by Bill Gates. And also they, at Christmas, have baskets for needy families, and they've been doing that every year. And I wanted to completely talk a lot about the Rotary, because you only know generally about the road race, but they give an awful lot of money and have a lot of other ways to raise money for the town. So, that's it.
Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I followed up with the library to check on how the event went on Sunday, and received the event itself was very successful, which we, kind of anticipated that it was going to be. However, they reported back that the town manager and the DPW performed really well. They were very pleased, and so I wanted to thank Michael and the DPW for taking care of that situation and ensuring that the library event went off without a hitch.
I also
Thank you,
want
and
to
just-
say that I was at the library event, and it was very good,
I went also. It was very, very well attended, and it looked perfectly normal.
perfectly normal.
Yeah.
No problem.
Eureka, I just got 3 approvals from the selectmen. Great, but I do just want to clarify, it was not only the DPW, but it was the facilities department
Okay.
that did the yeoman's work on that.
I probably misspoke. I'm sure the library people knew exactly who it was.
Yeah, very good.
Anything else?
Oh, that's it.
Diane?
I unfortunately missed the library thing, because if I'm not sitting with my Tom Brady game jersey on, they don't win, so.
Okay.
Just,
Is that the reason?
it is true, it's true.
Okay.
I've
The one that you haven't washed in?
Yeah, it hasn't worked out. So, just a couple things. This weekend's the Cohasset Cabaret, which is a wonderful cabaret show put on by Friends of Elder Affairs to help Elder Affairs. Michael stole my sauce off.
No, please repeat it.
'Cause I love this. No, but I also want to say I went to the veterans program that was at St. Anthony's on Saturday. And that was really well done and very well attended. And they had all kinds of information tables where you could learn about benefits and so many things. It was just a great day for the veterans. They want to turn this program into something statewide. Coral's a little nervous about that, but anyway, it was a great day for Cohasset to host such a wonderful event that got a lot of regional people too. And that's pretty much
Excellent.
it.
Steve?
It's that time of the year. Just a very quick update for those folks who maybe aren't aware of it. Our school kids are performing exceptionally well in athletics again. The boys' football team is still alive in the playoffs, having beaten Nantucket. I believe the boys' soccer team
Yes.
won in a double overtime yesterday. Was it yesterday? I actually heard it on the sports report this morning.
It was Saturday.
ATD. Was it Saturday? It was apparently quite a game. And of course, my daughter plays on the field hockey team. They won in a 1-0 double overtime game earlier this week, and again advanced in the playoffs. So it's not that sports per se is a big deal. When the drama heats up on the high school stage, when the music starts and so on, I'd hope I'd remember to recognize that as well, because it's just that the youngsters in our community contribute so much to what we are. Times like this, just got to recognize them. So
Great,
That's
thank
it.
you. I have two things. The first one, just again, like to remind everybody about the Veterans Day service. It will be held on Monday, November 11th at 11 a.m. at the Cohasset Veterans Memorial on Cohasset Harbor. And again, the speakers will be the winner or winners of the Deer Hill School Veterans Essay Contest. And our main speaker will be Cohasset Veterans Service Officer Vinnie Fontaine. The other item is unfortunately just heard of the passing of one of our prominent citizens, Dr. Lincoln Bloomfield, passed away. And just want to mention he was a State Department, longtime high-level State Department person and presidential advisor. And I'm not sure, was he on?
He was also a professor at MIT of International Arms Control. That's what he
Right,
did.
yeah.
He was-
And just a little,
And something interesting, we were having a function at our church, and it was the night when all these, Nixon, when everybody left the cabinet, and he was there and was able to tell us what was going on down in Washington.
wow.
We happened to have some kind of a meeting, and it was the most exciting thing to have somebody that knew what the ins and outs of government. This is
Yeah,
way back.
yeah. There's another great anecdote. He was in Russia one time, and he turned on the TV, and there was a big demonstration at Cohasset High School. He was in Russia. Yeah, the students were marching
Oh, yeah, that
back in the
was-
early 70s. So he's in
oh,
Russia. He turns on his Cohasset.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah, what were we doing there, Fred?
That was after I left. I had
that was
nothing to
after-
do with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, but unfortunately, my kids were there. Some of them were in it.
Ruh-roh.
Well, he'll be missed. He contributed a
Yes,
lot.
We don't know
many
when the
levels,
service
yeah.
is yet, though.
No. I understand, I'm reading a quick blurb that I read, he was also in the OSS, which was the forerunner
Yes,
of,
yeah, I knew that, yeah.
Living history.
yeah. Okay, license and permits, a one-day liquor license for Atlantic Symphony Orchestra on the 10th
I have to recuse myself.
at South Shore Arts Center. Do we have a motion?
Yes,
I
so
would
moved.
never trust them.
Never trusted them.
Mr. Chairman, are we
Yeah.
voting separately on the waiver?
Sunday night?
That will be separate, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so,
I'll second.
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
So it's 4-0, 1 abstention. Okay, and there's a second request for a waiver. Discussion. Waiver of the license fee of $50.
I'm not necessarily opposed to this, I just wonder if it's a bigger policy question at some point as to setting precedent that if we're going to do it for one nonprofit organization, do we do it for all nonprofit organizations?
I think the policy is generally, if requested, they've always been granted for fundraisers for nonprofit, because these are just one-item things.
Mm.
It's not like they're getting a liquor license for the whole year.
Oh, yeah, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of precedent, which, you know, I always think about.
Mhm.
My only comment.
Well, I think if it starts to become an issue, I think we need to have a discussion, but I don't recall that many of them.
I think there are only about 20 a year.
On the waivers, I mean,
Oh, on the
yeah,
waivers.
yeah.
Yeah, they're not allowed.
Okay, so, next item is Selectmen's correspondence, and we did get a letter from the FAA, asking us to look at some of their plans. I was wondering if we should ask, I know Ralph Dormitzer has really spent a lot of time on this issue. I think it may make sense to ask Ralph to just review this, and,
What are you asking?
well, there's a letter here from the FAA,
Oh, yes. Yeah, I see
on the
this.
status of the noise study, Boston Logan Airport noise study,
Yeah. Oh, he.
since the last update in December 2011. And it's basically asking us if we have any comments on it. It's very technical.
Well, he has managed to help us on that. So
Yes,
I
yep.
think you're right, yeah.
Yeah, there was a period where he was attending a lot of meetings. I know that when the final result came in, that there were a couple of communities south of us that weren't aware of the meetings that wish they had attended. But Ralph very ably represented Cohasset at
He did
quite a
good job.
long time. So, Mike, can you forward this to Ralph and see if he's interested in giving us some comments on what we should be,
But maybe not for, oh, do we have to get back to them by a date?
Took them 2 years to give us this update,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I know.
Doesn't seem
September
to.
26th. I think in the next, as long as we get something in the next couple of weeks, we should be all right.
It speaks to also having a CAC representative.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's something that Ralph might consider taking on,
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it'd be a
at
good
least
idea.
temporarily.
Yeah.
He's gonna kill me.
Sorry, Ralph.
well, at least we could get this letter over to Ralph and get his comments on it, and,
Do you want to appoint him as the representative so that he can?
well, not without him looking
here.
at it. I mean,
Well-
what I'm interested in is does this require a response from us, and what should our response be, and,
I know there were other neighborhoods that were concerned also about this and had issues
Yeah.
with dumping and whatnot, so if there's anybody in the public who, you know, still has ongoing issues with fuel being dumped over their neighborhoods, please let us know.
okay, and just a point of information, tomorrow night at Hingham Town Hall at 7 PM, there's a public forum on the FEMA flood insurance. And Congressman Steve Lynch will be there along with some, our local state rep and senator. So it's 7 PM tomorrow night at Hingham Town Hall. And anybody that has got, I know I talked with Mike about this a little bit. Apparently, because we're in Norfolk County, our maps were done last year, not this year.
Correct.
So we don't have the issues that Plymouth County has with new maps that have radically changed some of their districts, flood districts.
You have not-
But it seems to me that eventually they're gonna catch up with us, and Norfolk County is probably gonna hit with the same thing, so. But Cohasset has a lot of high ledge, but we do have a few areas that are low. So we just wanna flag that, anybody that's in a low area may wanna go
Well,
to
there are,
see.
I have talked to not half a dozen, maybe 3 or 4 people who have been affected by this and are looking for waivers from their insurance company, so it's not something that
Yeah,
is not impacting people
Right,
within
right.
Cohasset.
Right.
And the issue seems to be that, some people are avoiding the cost by raising the house up, which is
house up.
costly, but may be cost effective. I mean, suddenly you're getting your homeowner's insurance bill went from $1,000 to $60,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the issue. It's happening in surrounding communities.
Yes, I think that that is happening in surrounding communities, and, you know, one of the ways to reduce your insurance is to lift your house. We have only had one issue here in Cohasset that's been brought to this board, or to this office, and that was with an individual who had received a waiver in the past for an uninhabited garage and paid off his mortgage, but recently just borrowed some additional money, so now he has a new mortgage, and he went back to get the same waiver without the lines changing, and this year they're not granting him the waiver. According to him, the lines haven't changed on his property, so it's the same lines as he's had for 10 years plus, but it's just that the review process is different.
Okay.
Beyond that, we have not had any issues that have been brought again to this office. So I know, Karen, you said you've had
Yeah,
3 or
just in
6 or something.
conversation, a number of people have mentioned that they're working with their insurance companies or with the, you know, filing for waivers and different things like that, so they may not be
What's the
bringing.
highest bill, do you know, anecdotally?
The only one I know, and I don't know whether it's the highest, was 11,000.
So it went from a couple thousand to 11,
Well, yeah, it went from like
yeah,
1,000
yeah,
up to
yeah.
11,000.
That's great. That's crazy.
Cohasset
Yeah.
property,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we need to just be on top of this.
Yeah, I
like
plan to
any
go
other
tomorrow night. I don't
community.
know who
Yeah.
else does, but I'll be over
I
there.
plan to be there.
There's a school committee meeting.
Yeah, and there's also a meeting for elected officials that starts an hour before.
Okay.
So if you do have time,
What was that for?
there's a meeting that starts an hour before that with elected officials.
Oh.
So if you
it's
go
got a meeting at
earlier, it will
6.
be with
Oh,
the
I could go to
congressman
that.
before the other meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, I can go to that.
Okay, I don't think we have any minutes to approve.
No.
Well, which,
That's just kind of a standing thing that's on there. Topics not reasonably anticipated by the chairman. I don't have anything. Does anybody have anything? Public comment.
Oh, wait a minute. We had this letter from Dr. Thompson on the town parking lot.
Oh, yeah, that, let's,
quite
that should have
inclusive.
come up on a selectman's correspondence, but let's take it now.
Yeah.
So the issue is, Dr. Thompson, who I believe was a year ahead of me in school, has observed over the years the increased utilization of the town parking lot, which also is including some people that are carpooling up to the T lot to save money, but unfortunately, to keep a vibrant economic village, we need the parking spots down here. And it's not an easy solution to figure out how we accomplish
Well,
that.
I'll
So
tell you what
what-
they do in Winchester. They have a dump sticker, and they have parking stickers, and because they have a problem with the train,
Yeah,
and you have to have a town sticker to go in there. And people don't have it, they can't park.
oh, okay, so you require a town sticker.
It's a joint thing with the dump.
Yeah.
We have one for the beach.
Yeah, so that would be an issue though I mean, that would limit the village to retail use by only Cohasset
Yeah, but
residents.
Right.
you could, I tell you what, where you could solve it for the other people that are, you have the other parking lot. And-
Well, the issue is, I mean, you could have a restriction on length of time. I
area.
mean,
Yeah, like.
4 hours should be enough to do anything you need at the village, so
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's there for 8 hours,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just a couple of points to keep in mind. The town parking lot has been there for, 40, 50
Eons.
years in
Yeah.
any case. I mean, I've been here for 22 or 23. And during that period of time, the Red Lion has gone from, a small pub to a small hotel and a more active restaurant and function business. There's been a building that's gone up across the street from the Red Lion and now houses some very active businesses and practices. The same thing's happened on the other end with the construction of the building that's adjacent to Dooley's and the like. And there are several active businesses in there. So the net result is the use of that parking lot has risen as well. And I take nothing away from what Dr. Thompson is saying here. It still brings up the same problem, but I question whether or not there's a lot of nefarious use as much as there is constant use. And it could be that it's time to limit the stay, which is, I think, where you were headed. Yeah, it's, there's,
It seems like the low-hanging fruit could be commuters that are,
could be, but I think that before we jump to that supposition, I think you need to observe that.
Well,
yeah, so that's my next question. Is there a way to observe that?
we
Well, let me
did,
jump in here, yeah, and
Who did?
last year, we
board
had the
instructed.
same
Yeah.
discussion came
Yeah.
up that the commuters were polluting the lot and not allowing customers to
Yeah.
come into the lots. The police did several morning analysis where they would park there and observe over an
Yeah.
extended period of time. And I believe the count that they came back was that there was less than a handful of actual observations they could find where people were actually pulling in a car and hopping into another car and heading out. Now, I'm not saying that that hasn't changed. I'm just saying that we had this hypothesis before,
Yeah.
and it was proven to be not true. Times may have changed. So I did ask the chief to go forward and do another study down there so we can actually have some quantifiable data to determine if it is actually happening. But pending that information, one of the things the board could consider is, in essence, you have 4 different tiers of parking. You've got the back row next to the train tracks, you've got the center row, which is a double row, and then you have the front row, which is close to employees, close to the shops. You could go forward and actually have the back row be designated for those that want to park there for 6 hours or longer, push them to the back.
Yep.
For the center 2 rows could be over 2 hours, 2 to 6 hours, and then the front row could be under 2 hours. So you're having the customers are closest to the shops. The employees can be, moving to the backer
And we have
rows.
the back lot over the other side.
And
yeah.
you have the back lot if people, you could classify that as overnight parking if you so
Yeah.
chose to do. But we do also have more people living in the village than we had before
Yeah.
too. So we
Yeah.
need to be accommodating to them because they have an equal right to use the parking lot as a customer does because that's what our zoning allows. So right now our zoning allows anyone to use the lot with no restrictions. The selectmen do have the ability of putting time constraints on that, and then we would then have to enforce those time constraints.
Can you get selective about it, Mike? For instance, if I remember right, when we rezoned the village area to encourage residential, that parking was part of the question. Can you go back and enforce that with some selectivity such that a resident could buy a sticker which would then exempt them from the time limit? Is that a question for zoning?
I need to look in that because I need to go back to determine what money was used to pave the lot. If all of a sudden we find out that there was Chapter 90 money used to it, it may adjust that.
Okay,
So I can't answer your question right now.
it's all right.
On
I
that.
that's,
But even with the residents, they've been allowed to park there because the town chose to encourage residential development down there in the upper floors to make a more vibrant village.
right.
Having said that, it appears in that whole discussion that the customers were the most important people, if you will, to come in and actually buy the goods and materials. So wouldn't you want them parking on the street and also the first row in the back where they're there for short duration versus someone living there or working there that's going to park for 8 hours or longer? Do you want them parking on South Main Street, or do you want them parking in the first row? I mean, that's a policy decision that you can make that would follow the discussions that were happening, but we never went that far.
So the state money would restrict us restricting it to Cohasset residents, but we still have the authority to put time,
Right.
Correct.
Wasn't that repaved as part of the MBTA mitigation?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I just
Was,
wanted to go
was,
back and
was,
check to make
yeah.
sure there was no Chapter 90 money put into the project. So I don't want to answer that question until I've done that.
Mr. Chairman, could we maybe put this as an agenda item and invite like the Economic Development Commission,
Yeah.
the Chamber of Commerce
I
reps,
don't think
that-
they've met in about 3 years.
or whomever, the Chamber,
The Economic Development Committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think most of the people resigned because there weren't any meetings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know the status, to be honest with you, although they
Okay.
did meet last spring
May-
once.
Maybe
at
before you have a meeting, an agenda item,
Yeah.
let's get the report back
Well,
and
that-
see what we're
that's
actually
definitely,
doing.
but, you know,
And then once that comes back, then
Right.
take a look at it.
But, you know, I do think that the parking lot across the tracks is underutilized. I mean, I
Well,
worked
at
in
some
the
point, we
village
are
for
gonna
12
have to talk about
Yeah.
it, so I'll flag it, and
Flag
meanwhile, we'll
it.
get the report, yeah.
And it, just really quickly, Hingham has more of a problem because it's a bigger downtown and actually
No, it's
not
awful.
as large of a town parking lot. And they give each of the businesses like 2 long-term parking passes. So when I worked at Hingham Community Center, you know, I had a pass, and unfortunately, I only had another pass for one of my other colleagues, and.
Was that for the lot behind the
That was for the
theater?
lot that's behind the theater,
Yeah.
right? Well, and actually, one of them is strictly for Hingham Institution for Savings
Oh,
employees
yeah.
and customers, so.
I mean,
Well,
then-
Erin probably knows more about it too, so you can weigh in when we have this conversation.
Another thing to consider, maybe the back lot could be used for people, for employees who are going to be there for,
Yeah,
8 hours or something.
Mr. Chairman, 2 other items that are listed on here is, by Dr. Thompson.
yeah.
That if they're accurate, if in fact it happens commonly, it's kind of a head scratcher as to how we deal with it, but it doesn't seem to be a fair use of the space. One is that the local businesses not located in the village leave commercial vehicles in the lot long-term, taking up spaces for transient users. And then separately, post office workers are now parking in the town lot instead of the post office lot, which maybe that's been something that's been done commonly over time, but if.
Well, I'll tell you what happened when the Greenbush came. They used to park kind of along the tracks there. We lost some parking,
Who they?
the post office in
Oh, okay.
particular.
All right.
There was a lot of parking along there that was lost by the actual rail going in and the fence. So, and we spent a lot of time counting spots and how many we're losing, and we getting everything, and it
You're
went
talking
back
about,
and
like,
forth.
along Smith Place?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, yeah, and so that got closed off, so that complicated things in that particular area a little
Okay.
bit.
There's also more bustling businesses down there
But,
too.
I mean, in all honesty, it would make sense for them to be in that back lot off of Pleasant.
If there was only a cut-through.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
If
Well,
they could only walk
The
down
cut-through
Smith Place.
known as Pleasant Street,
Yeah.
yeah. But I guess what we'd like to do is get some numbers on these different categories. How many commercial vehicles, for instance, are overnighting there right now currently? Or, how big is the magnitude of each of these issues?
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you. Public comment?
What about a three-tier parking lot down there? Why don't the Selectmen build something? There's no space.
Pretty good, Hammer.
Well, that's been discussed off and on over the years. There was a discussion of some type of building where adjacent to the teen center. It's a question of, and there are ways to do, what is that called, that tax incentive district, Mike, where you,
TOD incentives, a parking garage runs anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 per space.
yeah, so, and then there's a way to create an actual taxing district that would recoup those costs over time, but the question is, is that where we're at right
Something
now?
to stomach for that.
I mean, I think what we need to do is look at all the options before we get to that, yeah.
Right.
And there may be a problem with the water table there.
Yeah. Any other public comment? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Second.